Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Hang Up right here on the line. And I just realized as I was watching that intro, we probably have to get somebody to draw a new version of me because the full beard's probably here to stay. We'll see, because I also live in Texas, where it's about to start getting ridiculously hot. Last year was unbearable and really difficult to keep the house cool for all of the animals that we have here. Our electric bill was absolutely huge, like $800 to $900 a month, a couple of times. But yeah, we're gonna try a redo tonight. So if there's elements of this introduction you think you've seen, it's because I gave them a couple of weeks ago when my guest was here, and we had a massive technical issue that basically just shut down the show. Huge thank you to Dara for being willing to come back here. For those who don't know, I've been a magician and a skeptic for as long as I can remember. I got my first magic kit when I was like 5, I think. And I have home movies of that. And I remember watching Doug Henning on TV and David Copperfield. And I was very, very fortunate. When I jumped into it, it was, here's the trick your uncle teaches you where you can like pull your finger off and stuff like that. And then it went on to everybody in my family. There was a deck of cards around all the time, so I always had a deck of cards, and let me see what I can do with them. Let me learn to handle them. I'm terrible with cards right now, mainly because the diabetic neuropathy has made my hands so that they don't work, and they work, but I'm not going to be playing guitar, and I'm not going to be doing card stuff or anything. But I was always that way, and I wanted to learn, and I'm an obsessive learner. I was very fortunate that in my teenage years, when I started getting serious into this, I was living in St. Louis, and there was a magic shop in St. Louis called DeVoe's Magic Den, where John Mendoza, who's one of the greatest card magicians in U.S. history, well-respected, he was working there right behind the counter. And while I didn't study directly underneath him in any sort of mentoring capacity, once he would see that I was somebody who was happy to learn stuff, it wouldn't be, let me sell you the latest trick, or let me sell you this package trick or whatever else. It was, here's what you need. You need this Paul Harris book. You need that Paul Harris book. And so I ended up with like all the first edition Paul Harris books. They're downstairs, some of my prized possessions. And I was lucky. I got to meet David Copperfield when he came to town. I showed him a card trick that I invented. And, I was a little kid. I was, maybe 12, 13, something like that. And he liked it and, gave me some encouragement. And so I kept at it. Eventually, I got to meet James Randi, and now evidently I'm becoming James Randi. And we did a show in Vancouver along with Sean Farquhar, who's a 2-time world champion, and Murray Hatfield. I managed to hang out and do stuff with a great many magicians. Just amazing that just some kid who wanted to learn some magic found a way to kind of tour as a magician in short doses, even though that's not the path. I didn't go like from school and I was doing magic and just stayed in it. I hopped around to different careers and kind of slid in. I feel like I cheated my way into being able to do magic shows, but I love it so much, and I love the performance. But I also found that skepticism was critical. The foundations of skepticism, this idea that you want to believe as many true things and as few false things, that you want to find the best methods to making sure that you are less likely to be fooled and deceived than you might otherwise be, those are critical. And so I was a fan of The Amazing Randi. I was a fan of Penn and Teller. I was, it was funny because Randi he was an atheist, but he didn't publicly talk about it. He promoted the skepticism without necessarily promoting the atheism for quite a long time. And then I remember in one of his episodes of Swift, he talked a little bit about his atheism. Penn and Teller were the ones that made it kind of okay for me to call myself an atheist. When I found that transition out, it was, well, I don't think I believe anymore. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it. It made it kind of okay. And there were a number of individuals in the magic and skeptic community that I'm now fortunate enough to be friends with, like Brian Brushwood. I've done a couple episodes of Scam School. Brian lives, 30, 40 minutes away. And when circumstances allow us to hang out, we do. And same with CJ, who I'm going to go see perform in 2 nights and things like that. Just, I'm a magic geek. But the skepticism part goes beyond what I was passionate about as far as the fun side of things, and got to the important side of thinking. Now, the magicians are the ones that are the experts at deception and fooling. And so you would think that they would be immune to cons and scams, and it's just not the case. They're also not immune to religious belief and other things like that. When I was a little kid, I was active in the church. I was in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday night, Wednesday night, all the time. I hated gospel magic. Anybody who's serious and cares about magic, who cares about the history of magic, and isn't just, let me find the next cool trick to fool you, but wants to get into the nuts and bolts, both with regard to the moves, the apparatus, the props, and then the mental aspect of deceiving, probably hates gospel magic, because these were sometimes decent tricks, sometimes absolute crap that somebody could go to the magic store and buy, and without caring about the nuts and bolts of magic, just do the trick. Here's a handkerchief and it's covered with darkness, dark splotches. It's filthy. It's filthy with the burden of sin. And if we take this handkerchief and we put it into this box, and the blood of Jesus comes along, and you pour in, your red blood of Jesus, and you shake the box up and you pull out a nice, crisp, clean handkerchief with nothing on it, and this is Jesus washing away your sin. It's fucking awful. It's just absolutely awful. And it was insulting. And I was sitting there as a kid in children's church going, I can do magic better than that person by a lot. I can do things that could absolutely fry them. The revelation of the first time that you kind of fool the adults, if you're a kid doing it, is important. And if I remember right, I think Dara actually mentioned that as well. So I'll save that for a minute. But James Randi had already fooled the scientists by Project Alpha, where he got 2 young mentalists to go out and act as if they could perform psychic feats, moving things with their mind, remote viewing, all of these different mentalism sort of tricks, in order to be studied by the scientists. And just when the scientists were about to announce that they had confirmed psychic powers, and by the way, the guys involved with Project Alpha were instructed that if anybody asks you if you're doing this by trickery, you are to say yes, and it's over right then. And James Randi was communicating with the scientists saying, okay, make sure your test protocols include this and this and this and this. And they didn't pay enough attention to him, and so they were deceived. He was basically telling them how to bust these guys who he had sent, but they weren't listening. And the point, right before they announced that they had confirmed these sort of psychic powers, Randi went live with a press conference with the magicians that he had sent in, and exposed how they had actually, or that they had actually fooled them. And you look at somebody like Doug Henning. I remember when the amazing Randy and I did an event, that event in Vancouver. We were hanging out for dinner beforehand, and I was watching him just be the most charming magician I'd ever seen. An elderly gay magician flirting with and doing table magic for a waitress that we'd just never met. It's like he oozed this performance and couldn't not be doing magic. And he'd show me this little thing and this little thing. And if I had a trick that I was working on or wanted to share, he'd show me a slightly different way. It was one of my favorite days ever. But he told the story because Doug Henning was a Canadian magician, as was Randy, and they were friends. And Doug Henning got into transcendental meditation. Now, transcendental meditation, as far as we could tell, is just a bunch of nonsense. And they would claim that they were able to fly when really they're just kind of sitting cross-legged on a mat, kind of bouncing around and convincing themselves that they're staying airborne just slightly longer than the laws of physics should allow for, even though they're actually not. Henning was diagnosed with liver cancer and died around 2000, but he had abandoned all the regular treatment for liver cancer and pursued a diet of nuts and berries, because that's what the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi from the Transcendental Meditation, the founder of this, they were going to build like an amusement park. And this was the diet that he recommended for treating it. And it was funny because Doug had messaged Randy and said he had discovered the secret to flying and would be happy to show him, but never did because he died. The point is that nobody's immune to being tricked. And being tricked isn't about how much you know or how smart you are or what your IQ is. The second you think you can't be duped, it's too late. And this was a key thing that Randy basically preached for years. One of my favorite moments ever, I mean, including getting to sit down with him and talk and do a performance. It was before any of you had ever heard of me. It was before I was doing the Atheist Experience show. I wrote for a number of online e-magazines that were just crap, but some of them got passed around. And I wrote a soliloquy on skepticism, essentially, in response to someone's dubious claims. And all I was doing was taking anything and everything I'd ever heard from Randy and distilling it into a response for this individual who was making claims that he couldn't back up. And there was a closing paragraph about the importance and value of skepticism or something like that. And Randy found it. We'd never met. We'd never spoken. Randy found it and posted it in his Swift newsletter, crediting me in the closing remarks of one of the Swift newsletters as, a shining, I don't remember the exact language that he used, but, here's somebody who actually gets it and is out, saying good things on behalf of skepticism. It's one of my favorite moments ever. It's when you are working on something and you're learning and you decide to share it and you teach, and the person that you would greatly admire, one of the people you admire most, says, wow, look at what this guy is doing because it's good. I don't know if I'll ever be able to top that, because just knowing how a trick is done or performed or what the secret is isn't a cure for irrational thought. And knowing that we can be deceived isn't somehow an immunity to being deceived. Now, I'm going to use some language here real quick before I wrap this up that somebody's going to object to. And I'm going to be treating Christianity and Islam and other religions as if they are in fact false and people are in fact being duped by them. And I'm using that language specifically because skepticism, some people would say, has nothing to say about untestable claims. And because these God claims are untestable, skepticism is just not going to take any position on it. And that's wrong. The position that skepticism can, does, and should take is that if in fact it's untestable, it is impossible for you to have a sound evidential warrant for believing it. Similarly, when I say that, Doug Henning died because he stopped trusting the science and instead opted to listen to transcendental meditation, that's a slight bit of hyperbole. He may have died anyway. Science may not have been able to help him at all, but he didn't follow the data and the evidence towards the most likely solution. There are illusion creators who are absolutely brilliant, like Andre Cole, who designed a number of different things for David Copperfield. And he was a committed Christian as well. I went and saw Andre perform. I think my biggest the thing I found the most annoying about Andre's show is that he used a lot of secular music, but he didn't want the lyrics to play. And so you'd have a brief segment of a Pink Floyd song, but it's just when the lyrics would be getting ready to start, there'd be this incredibly harsh cut to something else. And it really turned what would have been a great illusion show into a jarring audio mess. So even though he was willing to play secular music, he wasn't willing to play the secular lyrics. Even though he was willing to design magic tricks and understand how to be fooled, he was still buying into a notion that I am convinced is not true, and doing so in a way that significantly hurt his performance of material. It would have been almost better to just play some classical music that doesn't have anything, or put in Edgar Winter's group's Frankenstein or something that's, just instrumental that gives you a feel. But it was so jarring. That's what stuck with me. Nothing, and he did it like an altar call type thing, but nothing about his religion stuck with me. And most of the effects and the illusions that he did, I barely remember. But I remember the music. And I'll skip the thing that I was going to say about Dean Dill going after Jerry Andrus, because most of you aren't going to know who these people are. But Jerry Andrus was one of the greatest secular humanist thinkers and magic creators that I ever heard about. And it was the guy was opposed to lying. And that's a difficult position to be in as a magician, because we are liars. But we're the most honest liars, as Jamie Ian Swiss has pointed out. The magician tells you that he's going to fool you and then does. And this is what makes magicians honest liars. When I saw what happened in the magic community, watching people tap dance around religion at skeptic events loaded with magicians, because their thinking is, there's some skeptics here who are religious and we don't want to irritate people. We did this at the Amazing Meeting 7 when Hal Bidlack was the MC, and I objected full stop. Skepticism does have the ability to address religious claims. Religions are the biggest elephant in the room. And if your skeptic group is avoiding dealing with those things, I don't see any need for me to be a part of it. I said before that skeptic groups aren't atheistic enough to suit me quite often, and that's just a personal preference. But what's more important is that atheist groups and atheist individuals aren't often skeptical enough to suit me. And that's not just a personal embarrassment or a personal preference. It is an embarrassment towards everything about the atheist community. Because if your disbelief or your anti-belief is not founded on reason, is not founded on a good understanding, is not the result of skepticism saying, hey, here's a claim that God exists, it hasn't met its burden of proof, therefore I can't believe it. If it's based on something else, or if you go a step further to just flat out assert there's absolutely no God, we know it, or science has proved there's no God, which I've seen stuff like that all the time, that is a massive credibility hit to the broader secular community. And now that I've given a longer intro than I did last time and everything else, please join me in welcoming fellow magician Dara, the Magic Skeptic. Dara, how are you? Thank you so much for coming back. It would be really great if you made sure you weren't muted, but I think it'd be funnier if you were, just so we could start having technical issues right off the bat.
It's a pleasure to be back, Matt. Thank you very, very much for having me. I must admit, I'm tempted to become a theist. I think God has it in for this particular meeting because something sabotaged our first meeting, and this meeting has almost been sabotaged. Some of your listeners might hear that my voice is a little bit croaky. I think I'm coming down with a cold or a flu or something, but God didn't count on my tenacity, Matt. So I'm here anyway. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you just fine. How you doing?
Awesome. Great. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be back. I really appreciate you having me, Matt. And I can't wait to get going and get into some calls and so on.
Absolutely. We've got calls. Just before we get into that though, I want, because while I can tell, I can't wait until we can hang out in the same place and other stuff, but we don't know each other all that well. And it may be the people in the audience don't know. So before we get jumping into calls, give them the information about your channel and what you've got going on. And how did you grew up involved in magic and skepticism stuff. And now all of a sudden you're, on YouTube and Dara Magic Skeptic. How did all that come about?
Sure. I mean, I suppose a lot like you, Matt, I got interested in magic when I was very, very young. As I said in the previous conversation, I got a magic set, a box of tricks, if you will, a lot like you did. And it's incredible. You made reference to it in your opening. It's incredible how quickly you can become proficient at fooling adults. And as I remarked previously, for me, the tell that I was beginning to fool them was their tone. So when you first get your box of tricks, you're crap at it. And the adults will talk to you in that condescending, childlike tone, which you don't recognize as condescending when you're a child necessarily. They'll say, "Oh, that's great. Well done. That's a great trick." And then after a matter of days, even, because it's incredible how fast you can actually get good at magic if you're just willing to put your mind to it. And I certainly did. I became a voracious reader of magic content, and after I got that magic set, I wanted 12 more. But at a certain point, you realize that all the magic kits have more or less the same things in them. And so you start to reach out further. I went to my local library and I managed to find other magic books in bookstores and so on. So very quickly, the tone of my parents and other adults became, "Hang on a minute, how did you do that?" And
Yeah.
suddenly the childlike kind of condescending tone was gone, and there was a tone of sincere interest and puzzlement. You mentioned Paul Harris in your opening, Matt. That moment of astonishment, as he would describe it, you could see that moment in their eyes where it's almost like reality fades away, if you'll forgive me for sounding too hippie-like or poetic, perhaps. But there is a
No, it's
moment.
wonderful.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's the thing that magicians are addicted to. It's an incredible moment where people just lose themselves for a second. And yeah, that was just it was so addictive. And so I proceeded in magic because of that. And I practiced magic, I mean, semi professionally for, uh, I don't know, I started semi professionally when I was about 14 or 15, and I did gigs for the better part of a decade in Ireland, which is the country of my birth, as my accent has no doubt given away. But I grew up and I went to university, became a teacher, and couldn't get a job as a teacher in Ireland. And so reality took over. I had to move to the UK, where I now currently reside, and I am a teacher in the UK. So I had to put magic aside basically and grow up. I would have loved if I could just continue doing magic semi-professionally, but that was never going to get me a mortgage. It was never going to get me off the ground. It might have. I mean, I never say never, but it wasn't doing that at the time. And I thought, look, magic will always be something I can fall back on. But I think it's important to get an education under my belt so that I have something that I can rely on, something more bankable, if you will. Because let's face it, there are many, many magicians, most of whom are not making a living out of being a
Great.
magician, right? For most people, it's a hobby. It's like acting. For most actors, acting is a hobby, and the ones that we see on our television screens and in our movies are the 1% of the 1% who made it. And I think magic is the same. So anyway, I grew up, I got educated, and the rest is history. But I still delve into magic. Magic is still a hobby horse of mine. I absolutely love it. And any viewer of my channel will see little hints of it every now and then. Moving closer to my channel, I started my channel as a magic channel where I uploaded nothing but magic videos. But I appeared on another podcast, and in that podcast, a good friend of mine, the Sergeant Ducky podcast, and we had a conversation back and forth, Ducky and I, and we got into like some political stuff, some religious stuff, and his audience had an incredibly positive reaction to my thoughts on certain things. And they said, "We'd love to hear more from Magic Skeptic on what he thinks about this stuff." So I started doing podcasts on my own channel, and the rest is history. Now my channel is primarily a hub of skepticism and atheism content. I make reaction videos and skepticism content reacting to haunted house stories and that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, that's where the channel is at right now. And magic features in that. As you pointed out in your opening, Matt, magicians are kind of experts in deception, but it doesn't mean that we can't be deceived. I mean, you and I are proof of that. So you're
Yeah.
an accomplished magician. I don't know how accomplished I am as a magician, but let's just say I'm a magician, and yet I was a theist, hook, line, and sinker, and so were you, right? Now,
Yeah.
religion wasn't emphasized very much in my home growing up. I was raised Catholic, for sure, but it wasn't, I didn't have an evangelical or a fundamentalist upbringing at home. I was radicalized more in the online space, I would say. I wouldn't say I wasn't a young earth creationist, but I was certainly an evolution denying creationist type. And I thought the Shroud of Turin was compelling evidence for Christ. And I thought, the cosmological argument was a great argument for God, and that Paley's watchmaker just nailed it. I thought all these things were great evidences for God. I was radicalized by thinkers, I use the word lightly, thinkers like Lee Strobel and William Lane Craig and the like. Because say what you want about them, they are charismatic as hell. And
Oh,
I'm
Craig.
convinced that... go for it.
Craig is an incredibly smart, well-read, well-spoken individual. It's almost not his fault that I've said before. Bill Craig and Ray Comfort use the same arguments. It's just that William Lane Craig has a better understanding and a better ability to talk about them in a way that maybe obfuscates some of the more obvious problems that somebody like Ray wouldn't. And that's not, Ray knows this stuff as well. But Strobel, on the other hand, I had the chance to meet him because my parents went to him when they found out I was an atheist. They went to some sort of rally that he was having near their home, and they're basically like, "Hey, our son's an atheist. What should we do?" And at the time, I'm in my early 30s, and it's like, why didn't the answer "talk to your son" come out of his mouth? But he sold them a bunch of his books, and my mom gave me the copies of the books for Christmas. And
Wow.
I
Sorry
said,
for laughing, by the way. I didn't
thanks.
mean to imply that it's funny. It's
No,
just
no.
that it's just I'm either going to laugh or cry, and it's just preposterous that what he did was sell them some books. Of course he did.
Yeah. My mom gave me the books for Christmas. I said, thanks, Mom, but I already have these books. And as a matter of fact, this one I've written a rebuttal to. It's on this website here. If you want to give me apologist books, I'm happy to take them, because at the time I wasn't, doing, well, I was doing the atheist experience, but I wasn't doing as much speaking and traveling on the subject and hadn't debated as much. And so I was still going through apologist content. I said, just ask me which ones I have. Buy me the ones that I don't have. I'll be happy to. I've got a bookshelf full of stuff here. I'm still going through this one again for about the 10th time. This is Jack Van Impe's Revelation Revealed, which goes verse by verse through Revelation to give thoughts on it. So when I did a debate at a Baptist conference, and Lee Strobel was there. And so I went up and introduced myself, and I told him because he won't debate. Lee, famously does not debate. And I was disappointed by that, but I was like, the next time some parents come up to you and say, "Hey, our child's an atheist, what should we do?" I'd really like you to consider telling them to talk to their child instead of just selling them your books.
That went down well.
He smiled and nodded, and that was about it. But I know you were right in the midst of something when I interrupted to tell another story about, because you mentioned Lee Strobel.
Indeed. Yeah, I'll wrap it up quickly because I know we've got calls to take. So yeah, in any case, I was just trying to make the point that, I didn't become a creationist type because of my upbringing in my home. In fact, as I mentioned in our previous conversation, my mother was a moderating influence in that regard. And again, I know she's watching tonight despite the hour alongside my dad, so I really appreciate that. But her moderating influence, that's your second time saying hello, her moderating influence was incredible. So I told you that anecdote where it was April Fool's Day and I told my friend that there was somebody behind him, and he turned around and there wasn't. I must have only been about 6 or 7 in school at this point. And when he turned around, there was no one there. And then I laughed, haha, April Fool's Day. Teacher comes over to me and says, when you tell lies, you're hurting Jesus in his heart, which shocked me to the core. And I went home upset that day from school. And thankfully, my mother said to me when I told her that the story to ignore her. This teacher was an idiot, basically. That was my mother's response. And I often think back to that moment and I wonder how different my life would have been if my mother hadn't have been that moderating influence. But despite that moderating influence, and this just testifies to the persuasiveness of the charisma of people like Craig, despite that moderating influence at home. And yeah, my parents did believe in God and they were Catholics, and I was confirmed and I made my first Holy Communion and I went to confession. I did all those things. I sang in church, right? I won't sing any of those bars now for fear of causing your listeners to tune out. But you know,
it just gets stuck in all of our heads.
Yeah, indeed. That music is catchy too. It can be, at least some of it. But yeah, I was radicalized in the online space by thinkers like Craig and so on. And they got their teeth into me. But thankfully, Matt, I found people like you, and not to give you too much of a big head, but you were integral in my deconversion. I discovered your work in about 08, 09. And
well, I'll take a 10% cut.
Funnily enough, you mentioned Lee Strobel. You know how he does this whole, I'm a detective and I investigated Christianity as an atheist. And so then I became a theist. Well, it's funny because my story is the exact opposite. I investigated atheism and whether or not it had any good arguments. And I investigated the creationist arguments as part of a university project when I went to university in 2010. And doing that, I had already been introduced to your works, but I wasn't yet deconverted. But when I was doing that, I looked at your videos again, and I discovered Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris and all of the rest of them. And it was through that process of investigating the arguments and exploring your work that I actually found my way out of that hole. So that's a summary. Apologies if I've droned on a bit too long there, but yeah, that's a basic overview of why I'm here and what brought me to this moment. And can I just say it one more time? It is absolutely bewildering to me that I'm sitting here sharing the stage with you, and it is a great honor. And thank you very much for having me. It really means the world.
Well, I greatly appreciate it. Now get over it, because we got shit to do. But yeah, anybody who tells me that they found Dawkins and Harris and Hitchens and all that because of my content, that's the rarity. I mean, it's usually they found, Dawkins' book first or something else first, and then they found it. So anybody who says that, you can go on and on and on and on. I appreciate it. But announcement-wise, I've got a couple of announcements to get out of the way, and that is you're watching content on the line, and the line is primarily a call-in network, and this is one of the many call-in shows here. Welcome to the Hang Up. Today, my hang up is magic and skepticism and whether or not people can actually defend their faith. But tomorrow's a transatlantic call-in show, and that's got Katy and Arden. It's, we have 2 days in a row of across the pond adventures, where, you got somebody in Austin and somebody in the UK today on the Hang Up, and tomorrow on the transatlantic call-in show, Katy and Arden will be there at 2 p.m. Central. Sunday is still unconfirmed, but Eric from Skeptics and Scoundrels will be on the show. Arden and I will be working a reptile convention in Bryan College Station this weekend. And so if you're in the Texas area and you can get out there and you have any interest in snakes or reptiles or whatever else, come out and say hi to us. Monday, Skeptalk will be hosted by Forrest. Tuesday on Chewed Gum, it'll be Eve and Alyssa. I can't pronounce her last name. Arden, get ready to jump in and Lubacek. Because there's only 4 letters here.
Yes. People call her Alyssa Lube.
Alyssa Lube. Okay.
So there you go.
Because I wasn't going to say that because I don't know her. But yeah, Alyssa Lubacek is going to be on with Eve on Tuesday. And then next Wednesday, did you already confirm that we're going to have Dara Ray next week?
I did.
I have the best producer in the world, and not just because I get to sleep with her.
I am quite amazing. Thank you.
In any case, that's what's coming up on the Transatlantic Call-In Show. That's what's coming up here on the line. But we've got callers who are ready. This one, wow. I'm oddly enough not. This is going to be a little bit weird, but Paul in Germany, pronouns are he, him, wants to take me to task for something about my Black Raven argument, which I'm pretty sure I said wasn't serious, but what's up, Paul?
Hello. Yeah, I wasn't sure how much you still or at all care about the argument. I just thought it was like an interesting view into epistemology, so I wanted to talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. So go ahead.
So I believe that the argument itself actually is completely, well, not the argument, the paradox is completely valid, but the way you're using it in the video or suggesting how it could be used is misusing the paradox. So just to clarify what my point is.
Okay. How am I misusing it if it's logically structured identically to the Black Raven paradox?
I think that's because the to accurately present the paradox, you also need to explain something else that was left out in the video. So I think it would make sense if I explained that a bit further. So well, I'll start at the beginning. I think the paradox starts with the claim all ravens are black. So to verify the claim, you look at a raven and check if it's black. And if it is black, then well, it's you have positive evidence of the claim, and if it is not black, then you have falsified the claim. And then you can invert the claim, like take the contraposition of if it is a raven, then it is black. You can take the contraposition and say if it is not black, then it is not a raven, and take the and put that into the general statement: all non-black things are not ravens. And you can confirm that statement is the idea in the same way. Like you look at a non-black thing and check that it is not a raven. And what is implied here that was left out in the video, that was what I wanted to come to at the what I said at the beginning, was that you take a perfect random sample because well, you can imagine if you stack the chances a lot, then you eventually have a high chance. So for example, you have an animal pen. Sorry, you want to say something?
Paul, you don't need a random sample. Every single non-black thing that is not a raven becomes a data point in favor of the proposition that all ravens are black. You don't need a sample. This isn't an exhaustive search of everything. It's simply modus tollens.
Yeah, of course, it doesn't need to be an exhaustive search, but like if you
it doesn't need to be any
I'm
search.
not sure if
There doesn't need to be any search. If the position is all ravens are black, then everything that you find that is not black and not a raven acts as a data point in favor of the proposition that all ravens are black. It doesn't mean it's enough to reach a conclusion, but every single one of them is a data point in favor of the proposition. That's the whole paradox. That means if you find a green apple, that's evidence that all ravens are black, which is really confusing and counterintuitive to people. And so the question should be, from an epistemological standpoint, how much should a green apple count towards the proposition that all ravens are black? And the answer is probably almost none, but at least, you know, it's there. If you did an exhaustive search of everything in the universe, you build up an incredible pool of data. But you can look at every green apple that's out there and every red stop sign that's out there and all these things. Every single one of them acts as a data point towards the proposition that all ravens are black.
Yeah, and what I wanted to say about this is that the data point in itself does not say anything, but it only says something as part of the sampling process. So, for example, when you sample a random non-black thing and you say there exists a non-black raven, then in this sampling process, you have a small chance of finding this one raven. If the assumption is true.
If you find a non-black thing that is a raven, you have falsified the proposition, and all ravens being black is no longer, it has been falsified.
Yeah, and that is the point. When you sample, you need
That's not the point.
to have a chance.
That's not the point.
My point that I'm trying to make. Sorry.
Okay.
That is part of the point I am trying to make.
I don't. So I have no idea what the point is, because
I'm trying
the black raven the black raven paradox is, this isn't something that I came up with. It's just true. And all I did was say, to whatever extent a green apple adds credibility to the proposition that all ravens are black, then also every non-fictional thing that you find that is not a god adds credibility identically to the proposition that all gods are fictional. What did I get wrong?
What you got wrong was that part of the black raven paradox that I agree is true is that when you are sampling, you need to have a chance of actually
No, Paul. There's no fucking sampling involved. The paradox exists whether any sampling takes place or not. It is a logical structure that if you begin with the proposition all ravens are black, then through modus tollens, all non-black things are non-ravens. It doesn't matter if you do any sampling at all. If at any point you find something that is not black and not a raven, that counts as a data point towards the proposition that all ravens are black. Stop saying sampling. It's not relevant.
Okay, then I'm confusing the paradox itself with your presentation of it in the video. Because in the video,
so it's still my fault.
Just now.
Yeah, you're the one that's confused, but it's my fault, because the black raven paradox is that if you find a green apple, that's evidence that all ravens are black. Just like if you find a non-fictional apple, that's evidence that all gods are fictional. How much evidence is it? That's the problem with the paradox. That's the issue with epistemology, which is how much should a green apple count towards the proposition that all ravens are black? And how much should a non-fictional apple count toward the proposition that all gods are fictional?
So what I was trying to say was that when you look at an apple, that is what I was trying to call sampling.
Okay.
So, and what I was confused about was that the application of the paradox, like looking at a green apple, was already part of the paradox when it wasn't, and that was where I was confused. So not a big thing, but just to clarify.
I will, if there's an error in the video, I'll happily correct it. But this was just a bit of fun, because if you find a green apple, that is never going to be sufficient to conclude that all ravens are black. Just like if you find a non-fictional apple, that's never going to be enough to conclude that all gods are fictional. But the paradox exists in the sense of, if we're going to, there are potential problems with logic, and we know about validity and soundness, and we know that modus tollens is valid, and we know therefore that the contrapositive, if you say all ravens are black, the contrapositive would be all non-black things are not ravens. We know that that's true too. But that leads to, does me finding this blue deck of cards act to confirm that all ravens are black? And the answer is yes, it does, but not in any way that's significant. Similarly, this non-fictional deck of cards, which, Dara, I need to send you one of these. But this non-fictional deck of cards is a data point towards the claim all gods are fictional, even though it's not enough to reach that conclusion.
Yeah, and the point I was going to make was that while the green deck of cards, or what it was, is evidence, small evidence for the claim all ravens are black, if you sample, if it is part of the right sample, that's how it can be used. This is valid, but it is not valid anymore if you try to use it to as evidence against God.
Why?
Okay. So when you take a random non-black object, then you have a small chance of finding a raven if such a non-black raven exists. Do you agree on that?
If I take a random sample, I might find a raven that isn't black, which would falsify the proposition that all ravens are black. Similarly, if I take a random sample, I might find a god that's not fictional, which would falsify the claim that all gods are fictional. These things are still identical, logically identical.
I think you found exactly where I wanted to point to, and that is that a god usually isn't that easy to find. Like if you look at
no, that's completely irrelevant. How hard something is to find is irrelevant to the logical structure and epistemology. It might be that finding a non-black raven is also impossible.
Not if the
yes, it may be the case that there are no, if it is in fact the case that all ravens are black, then it is necessarily impossible for you to ever find a non-black raven. So it will be just as hard to find. It'll be just as hard to find a non-black raven as it'll be to find a god.
I was just going to add that practical considerations are irrelevant as to the logic.
Yes.
What I meant was less practical, but more. Sorry, I'm thinking how exactly to express myself. Like if a god exists, it may not be possible to find an object that is God.
Not relevant.
Do you agree on that?
Not relevant. That has nothing to do with the black raven fallacy or paradox.
The premise before that was if a non-black raven exists, then sampling a random object may yield that this random non-black object is also a raven. That was the earlier premise.
That would falsify. I already acknowledged this, Paul. If you find a raven that's not black, you falsified the proposition. Has nothing to do with the paradox. If you falsify the proposition, you're done. But the only point about the paradox is that every non-black, non-raven you find is further evidence for the proposition that all ravens are black.
I think what's happening.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong. I think what you're suggesting here, I think what you're trying to say is that you feel like you've discovered a symmetry breaker between the raven example and the God example, because God is unfalsifiable, right? Because God is invisible, because God is spaceless, timeless, immaterial, etc., etc. Because God is unfalsifiable, whereas ravens are falsifiable, even if there might be a white raven, for example. That one of them is principally falsifiable and the other one is principally unfalsifiable. I don't think Matt would disagree with that. I certainly don't disagree with that. But what Matt is trying to tell you is that those considerations are irrelevant as to the logic that's being discussed here. So I don't know if that's helpful for helping you guys see, the through line here, because obviously I'm not part of this previous conversation. You guys are picking up on a previous point that I'm not privy to, but my sense is that that's what's going on here, that Paul thinks that he's discovered a symmetry breaker, which makes the God example different from the raven example. And while that is a relevant difference, practically speaking, in the world, if we were actually going out and doing this experiment of sampling, as you put it, that is not actually relevant to the logic of the question.
I agree that I found that falsifiability is the balance breaker that I think I found. And to clarify, I don't think God needs to be completely unfalsifiable for the symmetry breaker, but just that there is no object that we can find and that is called God.
You don't know that? You don't know that, and falsifiability isn't relevant to the paradox. And I got to move on, because if we just keep sitting here spinning circles on this, we're going to get nowhere.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, if you want to move on.
Yep. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you both.
Cheers. It's one of those things where, as a philosophy geek, I could probably talk about that for an hour, but
likewise.
but we don't. It's not what this show is about. And so I did a video, basically, for those who missed out. I did a video. It's on my personal channel. You can go to patreon.com/atheistdebates where you can, support what I do there, where I explain the details of the Black Raven paradox. And it's not a logical paradox. It's an epistemological paradox. Logically, it is sound. The issue here is how much weight epistemologically would finding this red cup add to the proposition all ravens are black? It does add. It's just absolutely negligible. And given the vastness of the space of things that are not black and non-ravens, which you see everywhere. Anytime you're not, you're seeing something that's not a raven and isn't black, it's not like you're sitting there going, "Ooh, there's more confirmation that all ravens are black." Nobody would do that, and yet that's the carry on from it. But
it's basically a cautionary tale, isn't it, about logic and how logic can have some counterintuitive consequences.
Yeah, it really is, and it's one of those things where we can say, "Hey, I've got 5 billion data points that show that all ravens are black," but we only ever need one demonstration of a white raven or a blue raven or a pink raven to show that the proposition is false. Same thing applies, and this is what I was playing with, is if we begin with the proposition all gods are fictional, then every non-fictional thing we find that's not a god adds to it, but it's negligible. But all we ever have to do is show one non-fictional god is real, and that falsifies the claim. The broader issue here is, why hasn't that happened? Why is it that we have yet to confirm a non-fictional God? Is it because it doesn't exist? Is it because he's hiding? Is it because I'm stupid or blind or wrong or given over to a reprobate mind? What is the reason that we haven't done this? And that was far more important there.
It's funny because it reminds me of one of the weaker arguments that some atheists will use, and I think you'll agree with this, Matt, that we have to hold our own to a high standard, and I would respect anybody for holding me to a high standard. I've definitely engaged in weak argumentation in the past, and thankfully I have a loyal set of supporters at this point who will hold my feet to the fire and say, actually, Magic Skeptic, what you just said there is wrong, or that this is fallacious in one way or another. And it's part of the reason why I love this whole YouTube thing, because I can learn in that manner. But I was reminded of the atheist argument, Matt, that I'm sure you've heard in the past, where atheists will sometimes say, well, all of the other gods in the past we've all agreed now are mythology, therefore yours is mythology. And I don't use arguments like that, because sure, you can make an inductive case there. If all of the other gods in the past were fictional, well, then yours is likely fictional as well. But I don't know, there's something a bit slimy about that kind of reasoning. It's just because all of the other gods are fictional doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a real God. And I would caution atheists from using an argument like that for this exact reason. I think this call demonstrated that with clarity, I would say.
It's the same thing. It's the case a little bit with flat earthers. If you look around, the flat earthers at every other stellar body they can see is not flat. Every planet, star, all of these things they can see is not flat. And so there's an inductive argument, or perhaps an abductive argument, that it's ridiculous to suggest that the earth is flat. But the problem of induction is this, like if I were to show, here we go, I'm doing a card trick, except it's not an actual card trick. So there's a black card.
I've got my deck ready.
And there's a black card. And there's a black card. And there's a black card. Can we just infer that they're all black? Nope. We got to one that's not. So what we can say is that until we got to a red card, we didn't have any reason to think that there would be a red card. That each claim, whether it's they're all black, they're all red, there's a red one coming up, there's a red one coming, every single claim requires its own evidence in support of those things. But we've got theist callers, and I want to make sure we get to that rather than just going back and forth about a video that I did last month. So We have an anonymous caller from North Carolina, pronouns as she, her, who's a theist and who says it's common sense that there's a central divine being. So welcome, anonymous. How do you tell? Well, go ahead, I guess. And if it's common sense, I don't know what kind of argument you're going to make, but present your case for the common sense God.
Okay. First, I'd say basically, we as human beings, just human beings alone, not any other species of things, because we're complex thinkers, right? You do agree with that, right? We're going to find some kind of.
Sure. Well, I'm not completely sure what complex thinkers means, but I'll just go ahead and say yeah for now.
Okay. When I say complex, it's the fact that we can take things that exist in life and observe it and create the information for it, basically. Right? So,
well,
because we
what
already
do you mean by create information? What do you mean by create information? What are you referring to?
Do you think chimps are complex thinkers too?
Yeah, I mean, but they don't think on the level that humans do.
Yeah,
I think a chimp is going to sit there and document everything that it observes in existence. Can a chimp do that?
All I'm trying to do is figure out
being taught by humans.
We are apes.
We start from human rights.
Never mind. You just go ahead. I'm not going to be able to get a word in. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to. This is
I'm just trying to. I just wanted to try to understand, because your argument is that we are humans and we're complex thinkers, and okay, to whatever extent we are complex thinkers, how does that demonstrate that a God exists or a central divine being? I'm not even sure what you're defining as a central divine being, but go ahead.
Okay, so right now I'm giving us a starting point. So the starting point is we are actually having a debate about this because of the way our minds can think, right?
Okay.
Right? Am I right or am I wrong, though?
I don't know. You're phrasing things in a way and then saying you're phrasing. Oh my God, can I answer your fucking question, please?
Go ahead, answer my fucking question.
Cool. I don't know the answer to your question, because when you say something and then you say, are you right? Before I've even had a chance to get clarification, you're already on to the next thing. So are we, you're saying we're having these conversations or debates about God because of our mental acuity?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know that that's necessarily the reason, but it's certainly a component of how and why we have conversations and think about things.
Right. So that's why I said this. This is our starting point. So because we can do that, right? We observe existence basically, and we document it, right? So if we're searching for the idea that there is a central God, what are we going to do?
Why don't you just go ahead and tell us,
right? Study the information around you, right?
Are there things that we search for that don't exist?
Nope.
So everything we search for exists. So unicorns exist if we go looking for them?
You can create it.
That's not
create
really
a unicorn. Accurate. You want to make it exist? Create it.
Make a unicorn.
How does one create a unicorn?
What if I'm searching for a unicorn? What if I'm searching for a unicorn? What if I'm Jesus fucking Christ? What if I'm searching for a unicorn that evolved naturally?
You're not going to find that if you haven't already.
You just said if we were searching for something, then it necessarily exists. You literally said that.
You can create it to exist based off of the knowledge of all the observers.
Are you gonna? No, that's not how this stuff works. When I say if we go searching for something, does that mean it exists? and you say yes, that's not a matter of we can create it. That's a matter of it exists. So show me the unicorn that evolved on its own, which is what I'm searching for.
You're not going to find that if you have not found that already.
You just said that if we're searching for it, it exists. So how is it that something could exist?
Because if your mind, if you can create the idea, then you can create it.
No.
Wow.
From science, right?
You're incredibly confused.
I mean,
I'm saying,
there is science out there where...
I'm saying, are you going to let me talk, or are you just going to try and talk over me the whole fucking show?
I'm listening. What are you talking about?
No, you're not listening at all, nor are you understanding. I asked you specifically.
Was it silence then?
Would you shut up? I asked you specifically, if we're searching for something, does that mean it necessarily exists? And you said yes. So I said, I'm searching for a unicorn that evolved on its own. That must necessarily exist according to what you said. And then you tell me that it doesn't necessarily exist, but you can create it, which is contradictory to the thing that we've defined that we're looking for.
Okay. Well, excuse me. I misunderstood your question. You're absolutely right. Okay. If you have not already found it, then it does not exist. So yes.
So that's not true either.
Go ahead. Because that means I haven't found God, which means, according to what you just said, God doesn't exist.
Precisely. There's lots of things that we may not have found yet. It doesn't follow that, therefore, that it doesn't exist. It's almost like a black swan fallacy. Because I haven't seen any black swans, therefore they don't exist. That's what's happening here. Just because we haven't seen something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And yes, that includes a God, by the way.
But the time
to believe... One moment. I hadn't finished my sentence. Just because not having seen something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right? That includes a God, by the way. But the time to believe in black swans and the time to believe in gods is when there is verifiable evidence of that fact. And it doesn't mean that we have to see the thing directly. Maybe the evidence for the black swan is the black feathers that it left behind. Maybe it's the prints in the mud. Hell, I don't know. God, if there is one, and you still haven't clarified what kind of God you believe in, but if it's the kind of God who interacts with our reality, then in principle, we should be able to detect that.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. Based off of our observances of existence, period, all points to there is at least a central consciousness of everything.
What have you observed that has led you to that conclusion? Because I haven't observed anything that's led me to that conclusion. So could you please, this is what we've been trying to get to. Tell us what you have observed that leads you to the conclusion that there is a so-called divine or central consciousness or whatever you're describing it as. Please go ahead.
It's when you think of all subjects in life. When you think of astrology, when you think of different sciences, when you think of psychology,
astronomy,
when you think of etymology, I'm saying life exists and we give it subjects in every aspect of how it exists, right? So I'll give you a perfect example then. You know how they say, how can God answer everybody's questions all at once, right? Just a simple question, right? How can AI answer everybody's questions? Listen. I'm not finished. How can AI answer everybody's questions all at once?
It can't.
Okay, so you telling me that if 50 billion people got on their computer right now and asked Chat GPT AI shit a question, it won't all get delivered at the same time? Or somewhere simultaneously?
Correct. I'm telling you that the way computers works, and you're talking to somebody who is a former professional hardware and software test analyst. The way computers work, if you had 50 billion people ask ChatGPT for something, they're not all going to get answered at the same time. In fact, If you have 5 people ask ChatGPT something, those are also not going to all get answered at the same time. That's not the way computers work. What's the point?
I don't mean exactly, let's say everybody did it exactly at the same time frame. No, I mean, we can all each individually hop on that at any time, ask that question and get an immediate answer back, right?
No.
What has this got to do with God?
How is it that we're complex enough to create computer systems?
Never mind.
No, just listen. How is it that? Listen,
no, I'm done
how
listening.
Is it that we're able
I'm
to
done
be
listening. I'm done explaining to you how reality works. Only to have you fucking ignore me.
Talk about, and
only to have you fucking.
So I'm trying to explain.
Here you go. I'm going to mute you now. Nobody can hear you as you try to interrupt me again. Here we go. I want to know what your reason is for thinking that a God exists, just like Dara
Likewise.
does. And he asked what evidence you had. And instead of presenting evidence, you said, you know, like people would ask, how can God answer everybody's questions at the same time? No, we're nowhere near asking that question in this conversation. But when you try to use ChatGPT and tell the rest of us who actually know how the fuck computers work what ChatGPT will do, and you're wrong, and I point out that you're wrong, we need to start over. I'm happy to start over and have you present your case with evidence for why you think a God exists. But I'm not happy to have you go on and on about how you don't understand computers. So let's try this again. What reason do you have to think that a God exists?
Could I just add one thing? When you answer, could you please give an actual piece of evidence and refrain from analogies about ChatGPT or about how humans can create things and writing and all this kind of stuff? Let's not talk about monkeys. Forget about everything that's been discussed thus far analogously. Just give us your data. Tell us why you believe in a God. Give us the actual evidence without reference to analogies that's causing us to go down these rabbit holes. Please go ahead.
Maybe because I'm talking on a basic level, basically. I'm a universal thinker. So everything is universally connected, right? It all works basically off frequencies and vibrations. If you had to get it down to a science, at its most basic level, everything is frequencies and vibrations. How does that even exist? But the fact that we can take all the knowledge that we can create.
All right.
Okay, so
we're going to try again. We're going to try again. I'm going to mute you again. You don't get to ask a question. You don't get to ask a question and then just keep talking. We're going to actually answer your question. If the question is, how does everything work? My answer is, I don't know. But if you think it works by a God, you need to make the case for that. You don't just get to assume that that's the case. So there's the answer to your question.
Say that question one more time. If something came in when you were saying.
Ask the question. How can you not remember the question you asked?
Matt was pointing out.
Oh, you asked me to repeat. No, I didn't know what you was replying to. So
that's because you're not listening.
Because
let me clarify for you. So Matt was pointing out. So you said that everything is connected in some kind of universal way, right? And how can we explain that? Matt said, I don't know. That's also my answer. I don't know why there is something rather than nothing, right? I don't know. As to whether or not it's all universal, I can even grant that. Let's just assume it's all universal. I don't care. I don't know, right? You seem to believe that there's a universal mind behind it. Matt was asking you to provide evidence for that mind being responsible for our circumstance. Our answer is, I don't know. Your answer is some kind of a divine being, God might. So please give us your evidence of that for like the third or fourth time. Sorry, but it's just a bit frustrating at this point.
No, I got you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm frustrated because I'm a bit confused too about some things.
It's cool. These conversations are difficult. These conversations are difficult, but you know.
And like I said, right. And because, like I said, I'm thinking universally. I have so much that's within my head, and I'm trying to simplify it. So if I had to simplify it, I'd say it like this. The fact that we can study DNA, and DNA is a coding, right? And we can take the knowledge of the fact that DNA is a coding and create. That's what made me go to the whole ChatGPT. But on a basic level, the fact that we can create computers and program different things through a coding. So if we as creators can do that, how do we know that it's not another creator that did that plus another creator that did that? And it just infinitely goes on.
Okay. You just
Right.
said,
So,
how do
so
we,
if I had to
oh
say
my
God
God.
was something,
Oh
I
my
would say he was
God.
infinite.
Oh my fucking God.
Maybe
How
we got
can
a
you ask
delay.
a question?
Maybe we got a
How can
delay,
you
so stop
ask
getting
it?
so
Would you
frustrated.
shut your pie hole for long enough for me to answer your question? It's very clear that I'm trying to answer your question.
Okay.
Okay.
I got you. Go ahead.
How much, can you just stop? You said, how do we know that there's not another creator beyond that and beyond that and beyond that? Cool. The question isn't, how do we know there's not? It's, how do you know that there is? You're the one claiming that there is. So you're the one that has a burden of proof to demonstrate that there is.
Okay. Could you please explain to him?
You want me to explain it?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, how's it going, man?
Bad.
Yeah. You look. Look, I've gotten thrown into the fire now.
I can't quite believe this is happening.
Yeah, man. So I guess I'll try to explain where she's coming from, would be a little bit more direct. So basically, the evidence is in the fact that there are phenomenon that exists. Now, we can't explain the phenomenon, but we know they exist. And because they have relations to everything that happens in the universe, that's where the idea or a concept of a Godhead comes from.
So if there are phenomenon that we can't explain, you don't then have a justification for saying that they're caused by a God, because that would be the explanation. You can't simultaneously say, we can't explain this, and then say, we explain it with a God.
It's called an argument from ignorance fallacy. What you're saying is, I don't know, therefore God.
Well, I think that we're saying not so much that I don't know, therefore God. I think that we're saying that we understand that there is a lot that we don't know. And because we can have the thought of a God, that's why it exists.
No, that's not what makes something exist. We can have we could have a thought of universe creating pixies, but that doesn't mean they exist.
I can have the thought of a square circle. It doesn't mean that it exists.
Right, but there are things that exist naturally that because of the phenomenon and the way that they exist, there is purpose behind it.
Yeah, causes the question of it, but it answers it.
Purpose has to be demonstrated. You can't just assert it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Purpose has to be demonstrated. You cannot just assert.
Right, which is where science comes in. It's the demonstration of it.
Right, so we know that.
You know what science has never done? You know what science has never done?
What's that?
Science has never confirmed a God or anything remotely supernatural. You know what else has never happened in the entire history of the world? No finding of science has ever been corrected by supernatural religious claims. The only thing that's corrected science is more science. There's nothing about the findings of reality that demonstrate a purpose that needs an explanation of a purpose giver.
You guys seem to have coupled two. Just one moment. Just to put my finger on the pulse here. You guys seem to have coupled two rather fallacious ideas together into like a fallacy stew. So we have on one hand, there are things we can't explain, therefore God, although you said that that's not what you did, but that is literally exactly what you did, unfortunately. And if you don't believe that, go back to the tape, watch this episode later, and you'll find that that's exactly what you said. And the second thing you're doing is saying that because you can think of something, therefore it exists. Matt and I have given you several examples at this point of things that you can think of and yet don't have a counterpart in reality. The fact that we can think of something does not serve as evidence for that thing existing in reality. It simply doesn't work that way, and the examples that we've given you have demonstrated that. Here's a question for you. Is it possible that somebody can think of a God that doesn't exist?
I think it's possible for someone to have that thought. And
okay.
The reason why I say that is
just one moment. Just let me get there. I promise I'll give you time to respond. So, just to be clear, is it possible for somebody to have the thought of a specific God that does not actually exist?
I think it's possible to have the thought, but the reality of it is that you
but the reality is that God doesn't exist.
You're
right?
limited. You're limited.
Okay,
Well,
sure.
So just like with science,
the question is the God you're thinking of, is your God one of the gods where our thought corresponds to an actual deity in reality, or is your God one of the ones that someone can think of that doesn't actually correspond to a deity in reality, i.e., it's a false belief? You have not demonstrated anything approaching evidence for your God being one of the gods that's in the quote-unquote real category. What you've done is assert that your God exists because you can think of it and because there are mysteries in the universe. Those arguments are unbelievably fallacious. And put together, you've got like a 1-2 punch of fallacies. And if you're not going to acknowledge that, I don't know how we can proceed here. But I promised, in fairness, Matt, I promised him that he could respond. So I think perhaps you should get a moment to respond.
I'm playing chess.
I appreciate it. And I think that it's a matter of perspective, because what you guys are doing is you guys are saying, hey, look, the evidence is always the last part of verification of truth. Evidence is always the last part. So what is the first part? What is the creation? See, with science, the problem of it is that we're limited by tools. We're limited by physical things, physical constraints. So it takes a creative mind to invent something new. Therefore, we can use that tool for verification. So that's the part that I'm like, well, I understand where you're going, but without the creative part, without the thinking, the thought, you never get to the actual evidence, the actual creation of the tool that can measure the evidence.
You guys called to say that it's just common sense that there's a central divine. And now you're saying, well, we really just, we because we can think about this, it leads us to be able to investigate it. I don't give a fuck what proposition somebody came up with, whether they're doing a bong rip or sitting around thinking about the origin of the universe at all. I care about the evidence until such time as you can demonstrate the existence of God with evidence. Why should anybody care?
Evidence is the only game in town. If you want to verify that something exists, evidence is the only game in town.
Well, I think that evidence is the process of acceptance, right? So it's the process of accepting the fact that we can all agree on a central idea, law.
Do you accept?
Or,
do you accept?
Standpoint.
Do you accept that there is a God?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What's the evidence?
Absolutely.
If you've reached acceptance, present the evidence. I don't accept it because I haven't seen evidence. What's the evidence?
Well, the evidence would be in the fact that when I put faith in something and I put my mind towards it, it generally goes in that direction, or at least there's some doctrine out there that gives an explanation as to why things happen the way that they did. Now, that can't just be a luck of the draw, because obviously the doctrine.
How do you know? No offense, but this is going to be offensive. You're full of shit. You are doing the same thing that everybody else does.
Come on now.
Come on now. I'll laugh your ass off, but you are doing the same. You are engaged in the same self-deception that we all were. Of course, when I was a Southern Baptist and I went to church and I put my faith in it, it seemed to work. You know why? Because I counted the hits and I ignored the misses. And when things weren't going right, it's because God works in mysterious ways, or because everything happens according to God's plan and what I was looking for wasn't a part of God's plan. It's called rationalization. You have not presented any evidence. You've just talked about what your bias is. Do you have actual evidence to present?
Well, here's the thing about evidence, though. Evidence, the presumption of whether or not you accept the verification is purely based off of your viewpoint of how much do you trust the evidence that I present. So I could say, hey, yeah, I prayed about this and then it happened for me, and I could be convinced, but then you could say, nope, that's not it.
You're wrong.
But it is
no, you're wrong. You are wrong. If you'll stop, I'll explain why you're wrong. I can 100% believe that what you put your faith in appears to work to you and still not be convinced that this is evidence for God, because I understand what good standards of evidence are, and I understand biases and fallacies. And if you did, you would also acknowledge that your bias is fallacious to conclude that because you put confidence in something, that therefore, if it turns out that way, it's most likely true. You have asserted with zero evidence that these connections can't be coincidental. How did you prove that?
So I'll say two things real quick, and then I'll let you respond.
Answer my question. Answer my question. Answer my question.
It's going to answer your question. So the first is we both have to agree on a standard that we both can accept, right?
No,
because
we don't.
If I present evidence and you say
no, we don't.
Oh, but we do. You said
what question did I ask you, sir? What question did I just fucking ask you?
You asked for evidence.
No, I asked.
He asked to explain the coincidences.
How did you rule out coincidence as a possibility? That's the question I asked you. If you don't even know what my question is, how can you have any confidence that you're about to answer it? You got to listen.
Okay, we'll do that then. How can we rule out coincidence, right? Are coincidence and purpose, right? Something that has happened purpose, so there's a pattern, there's some kind of relationship, there's some kind of connection. Aren't they separate words in the dictionary? They each have their own meaning, right? No, I'm going to answer your question. So, how do we know coincidence from purposeness, right? Coincidence is random. Coincidence has no intent. So when I say, I prayed for this, it happened, the energy moved that way, and I'm providing that as evidence, there's no coincidence there.
Have you ever prayed for something and it didn't happen
the way that I want? Go ahead.
Have you ever prayed for something and it didn't happen?
Yep. So if I pray for something and it didn't happen, the intent was for it to happen, and the explanation may not be apparent right then. That doesn't mean that there's not evidence supporting the actual intent.
I'm not sure if you answered my question. Things. So could you just say a simple yes or a no? Have you ever prayed for something and then it didn't happen?
Sure. That's happened to me.
It has happened. Okay. So in other words, there are things you've prayed for and they have come true. And there are things that you've prayed for and they haven't come true. Correct?
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
Matt's point is that you are emphasizing the hits and burying the misses. What he meant by that, in case you didn't understand, and just for the edification of the audience, is that this is basically a cold reading technique, but it's possible to use it on yourself. It's possible to be self-deceived. It's like the fortune teller's gambit. Let me give you an analogy for what you're doing. If I go to a fortune teller and the fortune teller gives me some vague prediction that I'm going to come into some money soon, that I'm going to encounter some money soon, okay? Please notice that soon is an ambiguous word. Soon could mean 5 minutes from now. Soon could mean 5 years from now. It's an ambiguous phrase, right? So if I walk out of that fortune teller's office, if fortune tellers have offices, I don't know. If I walk out of the building and then I find, I don't know, a 20 on the floor, oh my God, the fortune teller was correct. The fortune teller told me I was going to find some money soon. And so it's a hit. If I don't, and a week passes by, and then I purchase a lottery ticket and I win $10, oh my God, the fortune teller was correct. If 5 years pass by and a loved one of mine tragically passes away and leaves me money in their will, oh my God, the fortune teller was correct. You see, the fortune teller's gambit is that the fortune teller is either correct or the prediction hasn't come true yet. This is known by another name. It's called an unfalsifiable claim. In other words, well, technically, maybe it might not be unfalsifiable in the fullest sense. But the point I'm trying to make is that the fortune teller has an out either way. Either the prediction has come true or it hasn't come true yet. In your case, you're using the exact same logic. It's just that you say, God either answered my prayer or the answer was no. What you're doing is erecting a psychological apparatus that allows you to continue to believe in your God, even when what you prayed for doesn't come true, because you can self-deceive yourself and tell yourself, those were the times when God didn't answer my prayer. The question is this: how does one distinguish between a God that's answering prayers sometimes and other times the answer is no? How do you distinguish between that and a God that doesn't exist at all? And that's the thing that you haven't explained, because the reality is I could believe in God that doesn't exist. One moment, I swear I'm almost done. I know I've said a lot. Just give me 30 more seconds. The truth is, somebody just like you, let me finish. On somebody just like you on the other side of the world who believes in a completely different God from you might be getting so-called answers to their prayers and then other times no, but according to mere chance, according to mere randomness. Maybe sometimes they get what they want and maybe sometimes they don't get what they want, but they don't believe in a factually existing God, and they're interpreting this randomness as God either saying yes or no. For the umpteenth time, how have you demonstrated that you're not that person on the other side of the world? How do you know that you're actually receiving answers from a literally existing God?
So I'm going to answer your question with the same parallel that you just used for me, right? You believe in the law. What happens when you go out in your car and you speed? Sometimes you get a ticket, sometimes you don't. If you believe in law, then you know what the result would be. But just because it happens or doesn't happen, that has nothing to do with the law. It exists because it does. And you have to believe in it in order to follow the same rules.
No, this is a very poor analogy.
No,
it's an extremely poor
I'm going to
analogy.
let Dara tell you how bad this is, because I would absolutely, like, I appreciate that your partner brought in her backup dancer, but this is embarrassingly bad right now.
This is a very poor analogy.
You know, I'm back up there, so you know, for a living color. You know what I'm saying?
Can I explain to you why this is a poor analogy?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we know that lawmakers exist. You could go to the government buildings where they're writing legislation. We know that lawmakers exist. We know that legislation exists. You can read the legislation. These things are demonstrably true, right? So yes, it's true that sometimes you'll get a ticket and sometimes you won't if you speed, right? And sometimes when you pray for something, you get what you want and sometimes you don't, right? The difference is that it's possible. Let me start that again. The difference is you haven't provided any independent evidence of the so-called lawgiver. You can't just use a law analogy because there are lawmakers and we know that they exist. You can speak to lawmakers. You could probably go online right now and apply for a job in the government and become a legislator and so on. This is demonstrably true. And so what we're asking you for is evidence like that. Could you provide evidence that your God is true? I'm not saying the fact that your prayer is answered sometimes and not answered other times demonstrates that your God doesn't exist. I didn't say that. I never once said that your God doesn't exist because your prayer gets answered sometimes and not other times. What I'm asking you for is evidence that it is more than randomness, because you already agreed with me that it's possible for somebody to believe in a God that doesn't exist. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that you agree that randomness could be a feature of this. Whether or not randomness really exists in reality, we won't get into. Determinism is not easily dismissed, I would argue, but let's just table that. I'm asking you for evidence that your prayer is being answered, inverted commas. I want to know what evidence you have that it is more than just coincidence. That's what we're asking for.
Okay, so I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to answer your question with the same analogy that you just gave me. The same way that we know lawmakers exist, we know that the universal laws also exist. So there had to be a lawmaker to make sure that those universal laws exist, like gravity.
No, sir. Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way.
All right.
You're equivocating, sir. Sir, do you know what an equivocation is? Sir, do you know what an
You equivocated with me first.
Do you know what an equivocation is? It's not the same. Do you know what an equivocation is?
The laws?
Yes, sir, I do.
I bet you don't. I'll bet straight up every penny in my pocket that you absolutely don't.
We use the word law
to
talk about. Let me explain. Let me explain how you're equivocating, sir. Let me explain. Let me explain. Okay. So this really isn't clever.
Now you're muted, and nobody will hear a fucking word you say for quite a while, because I can't take any more of this. This is not a fucking joke or a game. Yeah. You called in to suggest that you could prove that a God exists. And we have been sitting here dancing around over and over and over, asking you very basic questions for which you don't have even the first inkling of an understanding of what we're talking about. When we talk about, hey, how do you tell the difference between this? We're not saying you're wrong. We're asking you to prove the point that you claim you can prove, and then you don't do it. And every time you come up, I'm going to answer you with the same analogy you did, which proves A, that you don't understand the analogy of the point being made, and B, that you don't know how to answer the question. Because once again, you have asserted that you were going to answer the question when you absolutely 100% did not answer the question. The laws of the universe is a colloquialism that describes the rules by which the universe operates. They are not prescriptive laws like a speed limit. They are descriptive laws. All they do is describe how the universe works. They don't in any way. It's not like there's a peace officer sitting out there saying, the speed limit of light in a vacuum is this. Whoop, light, you're getting ready to go too fast. I'm going to give you a ticket. They're not prescriptive laws like that. They are descriptive. So your analogy is 100% undeniably flawed as fuck. Do you actually have evidence to support your claim that what you experienced as answered prayer or answered guidance based on faith is not coincidence? Yes or no?
I've explained it to you. Absolutely. Goodbye. And every single time.
Goodbye. Yeah, Goodbye. We're done. Goodbye. We're done. You don't get to come back and do the I've explained it to you. No. What you've done is babble on incoherently about concepts that are not in any way confirmation or evidence of the bullshit that you're rationalizing, which is, hey, when I put my faith in something, it tends to come true. Really? At what rate? Let's put that to the test, because unlike you, Anonymous, and your backup dancer, some people have tried to put this to the test. Organizations like the Templeton Foundation have attempted to say, okay, does intercessory prayer work? Let's put it to the test. And the Templeton Foundation, a negative
correlation.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt.
The Templeton Foundation did a test and found out that, you know what? Intercessory prayer does not work. And what's worse is for the participants in the study who knew they were being prayed for, their healing was worse. And the speculation is that there was like a performance anxiety, that they were so worried about making God look bad that they made themselves sicker. But to date, every time we've attempted to demonstrate any strong correlation that might even get us close to being able to investigate that there's causation about prayer and intercessory prayer, it has failed to demonstrate any sort of effect. What you're engaged in is an incredibly small sample size, a data set of you and your prayers and you and your faiths. What you are engaged in are equivocation fallacies, and I'll still bet you, although now you probably had time to go look it up, but I bet you couldn't have explained it.
I agree.
This is not about, I think you guys are both probably awesome and bright and funny and pleasant, but you're digging into subjects without a basic understanding of how to assess them, what is already known and not known about them, and figuring that you can just, well, it's just like the laws of the universe, there has to be a lawgiver. No, we are the lawgiver about our prescriptive laws in society. You can see where they're written down. You can explore exactly what they are, when they were revised, who voted on them, what the ruling was, and you can go and look up every court decision that's ever been made about what the courts have decided on these things. If a cop decides to not give you a ticket, that's because he's exercising his discretion. It doesn't change whether or not there is a law on this. There is no law about the speed of light. There is no law about mass and gravity. There is no law about anything in physics in the sense of a speed limit or a governance. That's not the type of laws that exist in that realm. The fact that you don't know this shows that you're going to keep coming up with analogies that are horribly broken. Analogies that aren't going to get you to the understanding. And all Dara and I want to do is say, okay, we've done this. We've sat there and gone, well, if there's law, there has to be a lawgiver. Hey, why doesn't this work?
Creation needs a creator.
And we're not saying we're smarter. We've just spent more time actually studying this. And it's so frustrating to sit down and ask people the questions that should lead them to realizing where they've made a mistake in their thinking. And have someone just sit there and laugh.
Yep.
Oh, I've already answered it. Ho, 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 ho. No, you didn't. You didn't even come close.
It seems like the argument was basically the word law, which is why I accused him of equivocation in the beginning. The word law is used for laws that are created by intelligent agents. And the word law is also used colloquially over here to refer to the rules of our reality, if you will, for lack of a better description. And so, because these laws over here that are written down by intelligent agents involve agency, well then, therefore, these laws over here that govern the universe must also require an agency. That's a spectacular example of equivocation, and it's never going to constitute evidence for anything other than your own colossal ignorance about these topics. One other thing I wanted to mention, Matt, if you'll permit me before we move on, we could literally, if we have gotten further, I could literally have granted him what he was asking or what he was inferring, right? So if we found a person who believes in a God, God X, and every single time, 100% of the time they prayed for something, they got it, that still wouldn't prove that their God exists. That still wouldn't prove it. It doesn't work that way. The way probability distributions function, there's going to be someone out there somewhere who could be self-deceived because every time they prayed, they got what they wanted. A really, really good example of this, if your listeners are interested, and Matt, you and I are magicians, so you'll probably have seen this, is Darren Brown's experiment with the dog races.
Yes.
Was it dog races or horse races? Where basically one person gets all of the correct predictions, but what's revealed, so Darren Brown tells the person, bet on horse 5. Right. Yeah. So Darren Brown calls people and says, okay, I want you to bet on a horse 5 and you're going to win because I can see the future. And this person bets on a horse 5 and wins. Fantastic. Next bet, I want you to double it in the next race and I want you to bet on horse 7, whatever it is. And they win, and it's amazing. And then the next race, until he does like maybe 6 or 7 rounds of this. And we follow this one person through the entire documentary, and it's the most mesmerizing thing ever. Oh my God, how is he getting all of these right? It's absolutely mind-blowing. How is this possibly happening? Darren must actually be glimpsing into the future. He's actually got supernatural powers. At the end of the documentary, it is revealed, and I'll try my best to explain this in the abstract, but basically what Darren did, and it's so clever, he got an individual and told them to bet on each different horse. So let's say there was 10 horses, 10 dogs. I keep forgetting what kind of race it was. Let's just say there was 10. He had a person bet on horse 1, a person bet on horse 2, a person bet on horse 3, and so on and so forth. And the sample size was large enough that after every loss, because he'd get like 20 people to bet on horse 1, 20 people to bet on horse 2, although none of these people knew that everybody else was involved. If you do that, everybody who bet on horse 7 when horse 7 wins in the very first race, all of those people will have received a victory, and they go through to the second round. Then he gets all of those people, and again, he did the math, so he had enough of a sample size to distribute them again equally amongst the next horses in the next race, such that there were still enough to go through in the next win, and then enough to go through in the next one. So eventually, when you whittle it down, there were enough people that were selected out of this sample size that there will be X amount who will receive successful predictions for every single race. But the only reason we got there is because it's a probability distribution. The exact same kind of principle applies to prayer. So you can give me the example of the guy who had all of his prayers answered, and you'd still be sitting there, as Christopher Hitchens once put it, holding an empty sack.
The two other examples for anybody who may not have followed that, there's a scam that takes place with stock tips. And if you grab a database of email addresses that, let's say, have 1 million people, you send 500,000 of them a prediction that this stock will go up and 500,000 a prediction that this stock will go down. Now, whichever way that stock goes, you take the group of people that you sent the first prediction to that was correct, and you give them another prediction about a different stock, and half of them get a prediction that goes up, half get it go down. You take the ones that are right from there. So you've whittled down from 1 million to 500,000 to 250,000 to 125,000, et cetera. And eventually you'll get to the point where somebody has gotten 6, 7, 8, 9 correct predictions in a row. And if you play this as, I'm an insider who's getting stock information out to you, I need you to pay me a portion of your winnings and pay to get the next bit of information, because now they're starting to catch on to this and I can't get it out as quick. You need to gamble more. You need to give me a larger percentage of it, pay it. You can do that and get filthy rich, and somebody will think that you've gotten it exactly right. An example that I haven't done it at the magic shows because we didn't get a chance, but let's say you get 400 people to show up for a magic show, which I love doing. If you get everybody a quarter, have everybody stand up and have them all flip, and anybody who gets heads sits down, and then you have the people who are still standing up, you flip again, and anybody gets heads, stand up or sit down. You keep doing that. There will be somebody standing there in that room who has flipped tails 7, 8, 9 times in a row. Everybody, and the plan, I didn't actually put this in the act, but the plan was to say, everybody in this room has now been here and watched one person flip a coin and have it land 9 times in a row, tails up. Not only that, but before we started, I predicted that would happen. If you only gave those pieces of information that I predicted someone would flip a coin tails 9 times in a row, and you watched it happen, and that's the only information you had, that would be incredibly remarkable. You would need some sort of explanation for it. The stuff you people are presenting on behalf of a god is vastly weaker than that coin toss trick.
Absolutely.
Vastly weaker. And we're trying to say, as we did at the beginning of the show about magic and skepticism, that understanding how we fool ourselves, understanding what our biases are, understanding how, Anonymous, this is how the churches get you. When it seems like a God has answered your prayer, then it's true. And when it seems like it didn't, It's your fault. You weren't praying hard enough. You weren't right with God. You went out and partied. You weren't living according to Christ. You weren't doing this, or it wasn't in God's plan, or God works in mysterious ways. God didn't say no. He said not now. There's an excuse every time. And as long as it feels like you're constantly getting affirmation, you are the person who got the correct stock tips. You are the person who flipped coin 12 times in a row tails. You are the person who got the dog race stuff right. And it doesn't in any way demonstrate that there's a God, or that I'm psychic, or that Dara's psychic, or anything like that.
Or that Darren can see the
raw
future.
Statistics.
Yeah. Probability distribution. And if you're aware of the sample size, if you're aware of the data, it changes your viewpoint. But yeah. And by the way,
probability distribution, everyone should have a Galton board. What this shows is that there's a bunch of beads in this. I've showed it before. And as I tip this down, those beads are going to fall into a standard distribution. It's never going to come out the same way. Every single one of those balls could end up in any one of these. And yet, because of the way physics works, and because of the way our probability assessment works from this, you can get this thing all the time. What if I were to take this thing, reset it, and flip it like that? And we got a different distribution. Let me tilt that so you can see. Well, the secret obviously is that I tilted it a little bit one way and shifted the whole thing. But what if I had also tilted the camera and had it set on a table with a level there that had also been gimmicked? And now I could make this thing come out in the middle or the left or right. I could appear very easily to defy the laws of physics. But I can't.
And what's really funny about all of this is that we were just granting the perfect example of somebody having their prayers answered a miraculous number of times in a row. I used the word miraculous there conservatively, clearly. But right. For Anonymous, that wasn't even the case. Anonymous admitted on air that, yeah, sometimes I get what I want and sometimes I don't, which would actually roughly correlate to a standard probability distribution or coincidence or chance. And yet this wasn't persuasive at all, as he laughed condescendingly down the phone at us. But anyway,
sorry.
What can you do, Matt? What can you do?
You can try more. So I hope you're not tired, Dara, because we've got 3 more theists on the lines already.
Not at all, Matt. I'm here. I'm yours. Let's do it. I can't wait.
I'm gonna frequently turn the show over to you so that my heart rate doesn't get too high. I'm kidding. I'm absolutely fine. I joke about my health because I had a triple bypass, but I'm doing great. So up first is Mark here in Texas, who wants to present evidence for his God. Mark, you are on with Dara.
Hi there. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I apologize, but I don't have about 10 minutes. I've been waiting for about an hour.
Yeah, I know.
Very interesting calls and stuff. But I just wanted to let you know that I am a theist all my life. About a couple of years ago, I had this witnessed this supernatural event during a trip. Took a picture of it, and through photos, very, very interestingly, I have about 100 photos of what I believe, and it's pretty clear, is the entire second coming of Christ. And so this was a supernatural event in the sky, what I described to be Jacob's ladder. Very clear, golden stairs, 90-degree angles, very, very clear. Around that were portals, basically very ancient doorways up in the sky. And through that, we can actually see what is coming to the atmosphere, coming to Earth. And in this was the entire, and I've been studying this for a couple of years now, basically following the book of Revelation. Second coming of Christ, you see different stages of that. You see what's actually here now, coming on Earth, what is basically the AI that's taking over Earth now. You're actually able to see that. And then you see what is coming as far as Jesus Christ coming back, and then God, and then what's finally considered to be the New Jerusalem ship. Very, very interesting stuff. Pictures of Christ, what he looks like, pictures of God, what he looks like, photos, close-ups, which is remarkable. And so I just wanted to let you guys know it's actually quite remarkable and amazing to be able to see this, and that through this it just added confirmation and validity that the Christian God, to me, is the correct one, and that much of what the Book of Revelation shows, because I'm not a scholar, or I didn't go to seminary, but I've been really studying this for several years, and much of it is it's exactly what the Book of Revelation states. So it's pretty remarkable.
So can I just ask a couple of clarifying questions before we proceed?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
first of all, just to be clear, did you say you witnessed this directly yourself?
Yeah, I did. Yes.
Was it just you, or were you with others?
I was with others. I actually took a picture, and through my picture, was able to basically witness it.
By that, are you inferring that the others did not see it, but that only you saw it through your photo?
That's correct. That's correct.
So
Yeah,
other
okay.
people were there.
I was in a group.
I want, hang on. I'm going to let Dara keep going. I'm trying to understand. Other people were there. You're the only one that saw it, and you were able to take pictures of it.
Yeah. So I was actually taking a picture of something else. I was with the group, but I was the only one taking a picture. They were doing something else. That's the reason.
Okay. So what you're saying is this phenomenon wasn't apprehended by your own eye. It was seen by the camera, and it only became clear to you after you had started taking photographs and you could see it in the photos.
No, both. So I saw it in the sky. I couldn't tell what it was. It was in the distance. It looked like a large structure, golden orange in the sky. I wasn't sure what it was. I took a picture really of the landscape because I was on a business trip, but it was, kind of in a tropical area. So I took a picture, and then through that, I started noticing, really, what is this structure in the sky? I wasn't sure if it was a satellite. And I started really zooming in, resolving it. And I couldn't believe it. It was actually staircases, two different staircases from two edges, basically. This long construct staircases, 90-degree angles, completely golden.
Stop. I don't need to repeat. Where are the pictures? How do you know the pictures are what you think they are?
Yeah, so I'm in possession of the pictures. And so I've been studying
Can I just ask,
for
when you say there was a stairs, do you mean like a stairs composed of clouds? Or do you mean that there was like a manifestly physical stairs in the photographs that was floating in the sky, as it were? What do you mean?
Yeah, so it was staircases, two staircases affixed to the atmosphere, to the sky. Manifestly, it was a construct, golden construct. Clouds were all surrounding the staircase.
Mark,
there were clouds all.
Who have you shown these pictures? Who have you shown the pictures to?
Only a few people, some pastors, some friends of mine in science. I work in the field of science as well. Only a very few.
Can I say that right now? I don't mean this to be offensive, but I think you're full of shit, because if somebody had pictures of an event like this, why on earth would these not be published everywhere and turned over to religious organizations and getting you a Nobel Prize and, all this stuff?
Because I wanted to study this and understand what it really was before disclosing. So that they have not been disclosed.
So
revealed.
Do you have some expertise that would allow you to study the photographs and understand what it is? Does anybody on the planet have any expertise? Because right now I think that you're also shit at science, because I don't see how you could possibly have the expertise to investigate these pictures. And I think this is a big prank call.
No, so it's not a prank call.
Send me the picture. Send me a picture.
Well,
Send me a picture.
It's
sans.deity@gmail.com. Send me a picture right now. I'll put it on screen.
I may do that. I've been waiting for the right.
Oh, you'll do that. No, you'll do that. You'll send me a picture right now, or I'm going to call bullshit.
Well, don't call bullshit, because this is real.
Then send me a picture. Send me a picture.
There is.
I tell you what. Here you go. I'm returning you to the queue. We're going to take another theist caller. My email address is sans.deity@gmail.com. Somebody will probably put it up on the screen. You can send me a picture, and if I get a picture, I'll talk to you further, but I'm not going to waste time on something that feels so obviously like a bullshit prank call. You'll either do it or we're done. So here we go. We may get back to that one, Dara. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
This is kind of weird ridiculousness. So Jonathan in Texas thinks that consciousness is God. Jonathan,
hello.
When you say consciousness is God, does that mean that God is merely consciousness?
No, I think that that's the first aspect that we see of what would be the ultimate creator of all this. So I think we're looking at it incorrectly. Like, we're looking at it in the world of the material, and since we primarily live inside of our heads and in our minds and thoughts and feelings and memories, I think that it serves that the origin of everything would come from that which is the ability to be conscious, or prior to that, the ability to perceive.
Jonathan, what property does God have that is not merely consciousness?
Nothing. I would say that the original concept of God would have started.
No. I asked you if God was merely consciousness, and you said no. So I asked the follow-up question, which is, what property does God have that is not consciousness? And you said none. Those two statements are contradictory. So let's start over.
Yes. It would be everything and nothing. I know that does sound contradictory.
No. Something can't be everything and nothing. That is a nonsense statement. Please start over.
If you are the totality of everything, and also that which brings the totality of everything, your origin would be nothing. So therefore,
No. I'm not going to let you just fucking babble, Jonathan. You don't get to say you're everything and nothing, or if you are the origin of everything, then your origin is nothing. You need to say things that actually make sense and result in an evidence-based case for God. If all you're doing is calling in to say, dude, I think that like consciousness is the key to finding God, I don't give a shit. Prove it.
So then your primary concern is to prove a material matter.
No, you added material. No. My primary concern is there good reason to believe there's a God? Yes or no? What is that good reason? Simply saying that you think consciousness, you personally are convinced, and you've called before to do this bullshit a year ago.
We've never talked. No, I never have.
I'm sorry. I got a call from this number on Sunday, March 3rd, and there's been 2 total calls from this number, and it literally says that you called on Sunday to say that you think consciousness is God. So what we didn't do is actually take hang on, God, if you'd shut up. So what I was saying is, what you're saying is that you didn't actually get on the show despite calling for the same topic, right?
Right.
Cool. Is all that you're saying is that you think consciousness is the way to find a God? Because when you find the God, that's when you should call.
Well, I thought it was a good reasoning behind whether or not God exists, which I thought was
you're wrong.
Purpose of your platform.
Well, you
haven't presented a reason. You've just asserted that consciousness is evidence for a God. Do you actually have more than the assertion?
I would say that depending on, because my definition of God is everything and nothing. But if you don't accept that definition, I can't prove what your definition would be of God. I don't accept that it's a coherent
concept. That's like saying God is 1 and 0. It's dumber than a sack of hammers. 1 and 0, and 0 aren't the same thing. You literally, when I said it's like saying God is 1 and 0, you said yes. That is a contradiction. Something isn't both 1 and 0. Something isn't both everything and nothing. Do you just not give a shit about logic?
No, if you're limited, then yes, that would be correct. But if you are God, which would have to be defined as unlimited, then yes, you would have to be able to apply
no. You don't just get to make shit up and then say it's not a contradiction, because that would be special pleading to define a God that is not coherent with logic. You don't get to say, okay, Give me the properties of the God that you're saying exists. Start listing the properties of the God that you think exists and how you know that those properties are correct. Go.
Well, if I say my same answer, I know that you'll be upset with that. If I could just
Never mind. I'm done talking to you, Jonathan, because I asked you to do something and now you're just going to whine about how I'm not going to let you do the same thing again.
I would say it again. It could be logic. It would be logic. Logic is an attribute
logic
of God.
Isn't everything and nothing. No, Jonathan, is logic. Jonathan, listen. Jonathan, oh my God, I'm going to mute you. Shut the fuck up. Jonathan, is logic both everything and nothing?
Hello? Oh, did I get
Jonathan, is logic Jonathan, is logic both everything and nothing?
No, sir.
Then why did you just equate God could be everything and nothing and God could be logic if logic isn't everything and nothing?
Could you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry.
No, I can't. You need to learn to fucking listen. You're the one that's contradicting yourself.
Look, so what I was saying is that I'm not saying that God is logic.
You're not
so
saying
logic
anything
doesn't
anymore.
Follow the definition.
You're not saying anything anymore. I'm muting you. You said that God is everything and nothing, and you said that God could be logic. And so I said, can logic be everything and nothing? And you said no. That's like saying God is X or God is Y. And I say, can Y be X? And you say no. So now you've entered a contradiction. How do you resolve that contradiction?
Because everything is one. So there is only one, but it encompasses everything. So everything is an attribute of that one.
All yours, Dara.
So the oneness would be God. Like God, everything comes from God. It's similar to like a Hindu,
Jonathan, put the fucking bong down and bring evidence.
Well,
Jonathan, you appear to be just making. Jonathan, one moment, just one moment, right? So I can say that God is this deck of cards, and then okay, this deck of cards exists, so therefore God exists. That doesn't get us anywhere. You using God as a label for everything that's in the universe, and then pointing out that, well, things in the universe exist, so therefore God must exist. This really isn't compelling. And also, saying that God has something to do with the laws of logic really doesn't make sense, because as far as I can tell, although there would be some people who might disagree with this, but I feel rather persuaded by it. As far as I can tell, the laws of logic exist in all possible worlds, including any possible world where a God doesn't exist. You can't say that the laws of logic are tied to God. And I can demonstrate that right now, by the way. If God doesn't exist, then it would be true to say that God doesn't exist, which means it would be false to say that God does exist. And God couldn't be neither or both at the same time, which means that the laws of logic actually exist whether God exists or not, because you'd have to assume them in order to disprove them. They would even exist. They would even be true if there weren't any God, for it would be true to say that God doesn't exist, false to say that he does, and something can't be both true and false at the same time. That's your law of identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle right there, even without the God that you're claiming exists. Now, if all you're doing here, Jonathan, is alleging that those laws of logic are God, that you're just going to use God as a label for those laws, well, then I think I speak for both Matt and I when I say that we are very much not interested in that kind of an argument. It's just semantics. Again, this deck of cards is God, and this deck of cards exists, so therefore God exists. That's weak sauce, John. If that's what you're doing, it's weak sauce. So I don't know if you've got anything else to offer, but that's pretty uncompelling. If indeed I've diagnosed your argument correctly, please correct me if I've mistakenly surmised your view, because I mean that's possible, but that's what it sounds like from where I'm sitting, John.
I would just like to make a few corrections, if I could, with the way that you presented my viewpoint. One would be, I'm not saying that logic is God. What I was trying to say is logic is an attribute of God, and in order for logic to exist, there must be something prior from where logic comes from.
Jonathan, that's already incorrect. Logic cannot be an attribute of anything. The logical
unless
absolutes
the
merely
original
are.
source. It's an attribute of the original source, which
It
would
don't
be what
have a-
everyone is calling God.
Jonathan, you are mistaken. The laws of logic do not have a source. I think to say that they have a source misunderstands what they are. They are simply descriptions of, you might say, metaphysics. Something is what it is, it isn't what it isn't, and it can't be neither or both
Where
at the
did
same
logic
time.
come from?
It didn't
It
come
simply-
from
Where did logic come
anywhere.
It simply
Exactly.
is.
It came from nothing. It came from
No,
nothing.
no, no,
Which is where
you,
everything
no,
came
no, no,
from.
no, 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 no. All right, I'm going to mute you.
Matt, please help.
Saying
No.
it did not come from X or anything does not mean that it came from nothing. It merely is. It's not an extant entity. It does not have an origin where it springs forth. It is descriptive of what is, period. You have a fundamental misunderstanding of logic.
They would be true even if nothing existed. Right?
Yes.
So, am I muted? Can you hear me?
Jonathan, the laws
Not
of logic
anymore.
would be
Yes.
true. The laws of logic would be true even if nothing existed. It's just a case that nobody would be around to think it.
So you have to at least so then logic either always was or it happened at a certain point. Would that be a fair statement? For the concept of logic, for what logic is, the formula behind what makes logic work in our universe, there must have been something prior to it, or logic is the original. There must have
You're
been
trying
a
to turn
first.
logic into it. You're trying to conflate temporality with the laws of logic, and they are not temporal entities. When you say that they must have always been, it sounds like you're making a temporal statement, like a series of cause and effect, like dominoes falling over or something. The laws of logic simply are. They apply in all possible worlds or none. So you cannot assert that they are an attribute of a divine agent, because that would mean that those laws of logic were subsidiary to the divine agent, which makes no fucking sense. Because as I've already explained, if that divine agent did not exist, the laws of logic would still apply. So you cannot tie the laws of logic into your God. It just doesn't work. I can draw you a Venn diagram that demonstrates the truth of what I've just said. This is not up for debate.
That's very fair. I'm not saying that like a thinking. I don't think God is a thinking agent, because I also think thoughts, just like logic, came from the original, which is nothing. God is also synonymous with nothing, which is why, fair enough, as you may have discovered, it's a bit pointless to argue whether or not the existence
It's more than a
of
bit
nothing
pointless. It's
is a
so
reality.
pointless you're done. It's so pointless you're done.
That's fair.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. But
once you get to God is nothing, there's no point in continuing a conversation when
But
you get
that's
to
what
God
all the
is
religions
nothing.
are trying to say. All the religions don't know.
No, Jonathan,
I know,
stop.
I know the followers. I know the followers. I'm talking.
Shut up. I'm muting you. Jonathan, please don't be so fucking stupid that you try to speak for every religion and every religious follower as if they are one fucking identical hive mind. That is so stupid. Why would you do that?
It's monumentally arrogant.
Why would you do that?
I'm talking about why the religion and I'm sorry, it was a broad generalized statement. I apologize. What I was trying to convey was that each religious leader that began these religious movements, if you look at what they were trying to say behind all the religious dogma, they were saying very, very similar, exactly the same things. They're talking about this original.
Okay, I'm muting you again. Jonathan, I'm going to unmute you. And when I do, promise me that you will stop talking about religion when you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Not all religions are the same. Not all of the originators of religions are the same. Most religions didn't originate from a single person with a single idea. They originated kind of, I'm not going to get the right word, synergistically with attempts to explain things. Why is there something rather than nothing? Where do we come from? What's our history? What happens after we die? They become a mishmash of these things for you to pretend that, first of all, that everything and nothing makes sense is ridiculous. But for you to extend this to a broad generalization about this is what all the religious people are trying to do. No, put the bong down and actually go study religions. This is not even close to what the history of religions are. So promise me you'll go study that, and then maybe I'll take another call from you, as long as you don't try to say that God is nothing and that God exists, because nothing doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, how entertaining would it be for me as a caller to
get hung up on right in the middle of that sentence? Really entertaining.
That was great. I'm sorry, but I mean, Jonathan didn't get a chance to correct my alleged misunderstanding, but it sounded like he was about to reassert the thing that I accused him of, which is that he literally used the word synonymous. God is synonymous with this and God is synonymous with that. Well, God is synonymous with this deck of cards, and this deck of cards exists, so therefore God exists. And his attempt to make God synonymous with the laws of logic just fell flat on its face. And who knows what he was going to make God synonymous with next. All I can say is that I'm fundamentally uninterested. You can make God synonymous with whatever the fuck you want, and it's irrelevant. Yep. You're just playing a semantic game. God is synonymous with this. God is synonymous with that. All assertions, by the way. But, you know, somebody might argue that analytically speaking, you don't need to, when it comes to analytic reasoning, you know, a bachelor is an unmarried male. That doesn't need to be demonstrated. It's simply X is equal to X. Something is what it is. That doesn't necessarily need to be demonstrated as such. But if you're going to say that God is just synonymous with things in the world, I'm sorry, but you've just called the wrong show. Call a linguistics program, because we're interested in an actual literal God. If you can demonstrate the existence of an entity, he literally said that, oh, God isn't a thinking agent. At that point, I checked out.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I think God did something. Wait, you think a non-thinking, non-agent did something? Anyway, we have one more theistic caller, and then Mary, hang on, because I know you've been on hold forever, but we just have the rule of theists first. So we're going to take this theistic caller who has a rather curious question. Anderson's calling from Oceania. Pronouns are he, him, and has a question about how do we know sending kids to school is not mind defilement. So welcome, Anderson. What's the issue with sending kids to school?
Yeah, what's up? How's it going?
It's all right. What's up with the issue of sending kids to school?
I'm a high school teacher, so tread carefully.
Yep.
I've watched your other debates. You were talking about how kids don't have consent.
No, I muted this guy. I recognize his voice immediately. This guy has called and dropped N-bombs before, so he can go. He's not welcome.
Oh, okay. Cool. I've got your web address from Queensland, Australia. I've got your IP address. We're going to ban you by IP address. We've been waiting for you to call back in so that you could try and do another N-bomb drop and present your ignorance. So thank you, Andrew. I have now copied your IP address, and you little bitch will be banned. And now Mary doesn't have to wait any longer. Hey, Mary, thank you so much for your incredible patience. You get to be the final caller this evening with Dara and me.
Hey, Mary.
Uh-oh.
Hi, Dara.
Oh, my bad. I had muted the last caller and didn't undo it. You're good now, Mary. My apologies.
You're good now, Mary.
Hey, Mary.
Thank you for waiting.
Okay. I kind of wanted to hear that other guy, but I understand you're banning because I was a teacher myself, early childhood, young children. But anyway, I just wanted to say I really enjoy...
We didn't ban Mary, we didn't ban him because I'm a teacher. We banned him because he's a racist asshole, apparently. Now, I've never met him, but I would take Arden and Matt at their word. So anyway, just to be clear, we didn't ban him because I've got an axe to grind as a high school teacher. But sorry, Mary, go ahead. Go ahead. Apologies for the interruption.
I just wanted to say I really enjoy the new Tuesday night show, Chewed Gum. I didn't get to catch it live last night, or I would have tried to call in. But if Matt, if you could just quickly explain to me this character of Jezebel in the Bible, and possibly like the Book of Rebecca. Does that mention makeup and jewelry? And then, does that make sense? What? And
it does. But I adore you, Mary, and I love when you call. But there's no way in hell this late in the show I'm going to try and go through and give a dissertation on multiple stories and books from the Bible. That's just not happening.
Okay.
What I will do is if you send an email of what specific Bible stories you wanted to address, I will either address them off the air or do a video about them.
Okay. All right. But, okay. I had another one about the guy that chopped up his concubine and sent her to the 12 cities of the Israelites or something. I don't even know the name to Google that and find out more.
Yeah. It's too much too late for me to try to remember all the Bible stories that I once knew, and give you answers to all the things that, it'd be better to send an email and we'll see what questions we can address.
Okay. But just want you to know, I love the Tuesday night show. It's just, the photo of Eden holding the apple with a bite out of it is just, just puts the cherry on top. So, thank you so much. I know I've waited a long time, but I've learned a lot about logical fallacies, especially about everything and nothing.
The truth is, Mary, the specific things you're asking about are things that I haven't looked into in many, many years. And I would just get them wrong or misrepresent something. And I don't ever want to do that. So I want to be able to go actually look at the passages, read them, remind myself. And I actually, I've showed the tools that I used before. I want to be able to go through what actual theists, what actual Christian and Jewish scholars are saying about these passages. Because unlike what some people would like to pretend, I don't want to misrepresent what the Bible says or what people believe about what the Bible says. And so the ones you're asking are just ones that I haven't looked at recently enough for me to be able to dig in on them tonight.
Okay, I appreciate that. And it just seems like those stories or whatever are used to just, expand on the misogyny and these purity culture stuff. It just creeps me out. But thank you very much. I've enjoyed the show. I was hanging on, listening and laughing.
Cool. Send me an email, Mary, at sans.88, and I'll do what I can. It's one of those things.
Thanks for waiting, Mary.
Yeah, 2 hours and some change to get no answer, but it's I know everybody, I know a good chunk of the people that are watching are like, Matt's got the whole Bible memorized. Well, not anymore. And actually never did, but had good chunks of it. And sometimes there are stories that are very similar and you could get pieces of different ones, but I don't ever want to put out content without being pretty darn confident that I'm correct. And so I'll just give an I don't know and worry about it afterwards. But we have super chats. By the way, let me get the announcements once again. And that is that tomorrow on the Transatlantic Call-In Show, it's Katy and Arden at 2 p.m. Central, which is 6 hours and 20 minutes prior to right now, when we're live. Whenever you watch this, who the hell knows when it's going to be. Sunday's still unconfirmed, but Eric from Skeptics and Scoundrels will be down for that show. Monday, Skeptalk will be hosted by Forrest. Tuesday's Chewed Gum will be Eve and Alyssa Lube. Next Wednesday, that's so weird for me to say. I don't know why I had to pronounce it so weirdly. Next Wednesday, we'll have Dr. Daryl Ray will be on the hang up with me. And actually, you'll probably see Daryl a couple of times over the next few months as we have some stuff to work with recovering from religion. And it's a good time to remind people that even though we didn't get callers tonight that we directly pointed towards recovering from religion, recoveringfromreligion.org is an organization that I've been involved with since the beginning and greatly admire. Let's be honest. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I am not going to be the best person to reach every single person at whatever level they're at. I've been doing this for 20 years. I got my frustrations. We've had a ton. I love to get co-hosts on here. We'll get Dara back whenever he's not tired to do other shows, because the co-hosts often have a different way of addressing things. Sometimes better, sometimes not, sometimes calmer, sometimes not. That's why I want to have as many different people on the show with me, not just because I get to hang out with cool people like Dara and others, but because if it was just my voice, it would be, I don't know, weaker. Like there are people I just can't reach. And there are people that Dara isn't going to be able to reach. There's people that Arden isn't going to be able to reach. There's people Jimmy can't reach. There's people that, believe it or not, as much as I think Paul might be one of the best of us, but there's people that Paul G is not going to be able to reach. And that's why we need different voices doing all this stuff. Anybody who heard the conversation earlier, I almost wanted to pull up a script and have Dara and myself read the Kissing Hank's Ass script, but y'all can just Google Kissing Hank's Ass and read through that script yourself, and it'll be perhaps edifying about how do you tell the difference between a God that doesn't exist and a God that may or may not be answering your prayers and interacting that way. I had it up then. The process here is still about reaching people and having conversations. And if you have good evidence and arguments for the existence of God, we can go on for days. That's all I want. But if you're not going to answer the questions that are asked, it's going to go badly. And I'm only going to feel a little bit bad about it. I'm going to feel a little bad because we've had shows, legitimately, we've had shows where there were serious disagreements about the God thing, where nobody got upset, nobody raised their voices, and people answered the questions that were asked. Nobody sat there and, laughed or ignored or did this or tried to, when somebody would present a logical fallacy and we pointed out what it was, there have been people who just acknowledged it. It's when you say that God is everything and nothing, you said nothing coherent, nothing of substance, nothing that demonstrates either what God is or what God isn't. That gets you nowhere. And so huge thank you to Dara for being here today to pick up when my exasperation takes over. And by all means, I don't want to force Dara to commit right now, but I'm pretty sure that if I polled chat, as a matter of fact, while we're doing super chats, maybe the producer can put up a poll about whether or not people would like to see Dara back on the show. So now if they vote you down, it's going to look really bad, but I am supremely confident that they won't. And I'm supremely confident that you're going to end up back here no matter what the poll says. But
on that
for
note,
fun,
Matt,
do it right.
On that note, you mentioned about being tired. What Matt's referring to there, dear listener, is that because of the time difference. So for me right now, it's actually coming up on 2:30 in the AM. But can I just say, Matt, in response to that, I'm never, ever going to be too tired for this, because this has been absolutely tremendous. And I'll do this anytime, day or night. You just call me and I'll be here, because this has been, as well as just edifying for myself. It's nice to have your ideas tested. It's nice to have people calling and putting my ideas on the line as well, because some of the callers pushed back and had interesting pushbacks. Not all of them did, unfortunately, but it's edifying for myself. But it's also just a great privilege, as I said, to share the stage with you. And I'm down anytime, day or night, Matt. You can count on it.
We need to do it on Sundays. We need to get you on a Sunday show where it's on in the afternoon and we can run and all that stuff. But anyway, we're going to get to super chats, because that's one of the things that happens here on the show. If you submitted any super chat over $5, we're going to read them all. We'll alternate back and forth. And as a reminder,
I think it's 10 on the show.
Is it? Okay, it's 10 on this show. My bad. In that case, do two of them. If you do 2 5s, I'll we'll try and make sure that Arden notices it. But first of all, $10 from William Mattis. What cereal has Jimmy switched this week? Captain Crunch. And it's because the only cereal that I ever get, which I don't buy anymore at all, is Crunch Berries. But if they don't have Crunch Berries, in a pinch, I'll take the regular Captain Crunch. So I'm going to assume that Jimmy has swapped out my Crunch Berries with Captain Crunch. That's the closest I can get to answering that question. Your turn, sir.
Am I reading this one?
Yeah,
I can. Sorry, I didn't realize we were alternating. I must have missed that. Okay, from Greg, 1999 super chat from Greg. Matt, do you think there is a connection between the growth of nuns and the decrease in quality theist callers to your shows?
No. I'm not saying there's not. I'm saying I'm not convinced that that connection is causal or strongly correlated. I think there was a period of time when there was an internet explosion and when internet atheism was really kicking off and people got excited about it. And now there's 1,000,001 call-in shows and there are people getting 1 million views just taking random calls on a TikTok stream. Which, I'll just keep saying, I guess I'm too old to do, even though one of my TikToks got like 250,000 views in the first couple days, and it wasn't about religion that one was actually. I wouldn't want to say that the growth of the nuns is because, we've convinced the good theist callers. I mean, that's kind of what it implies here, is that any reasonable theist has been debunked. No. I think that there's a vacillation between callers run in cycles, both with the content that they're talking about and the frequency with which they're going to call. And I think the fact that shows have been moved around, everything else, is an issue. I also think in the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of really great theistic callers and some that, aren't ready for prime time. And I think I was going to say that exact same.
I was going to say the same thing, Matt. As a viewer of the show, I have seen numerous very, very good theist callers who were honest, answered questions, were reflective. In fact, I was on Skeptalk with Shannon Q a number of weeks back, and we had some, shout out to Shannon, I absolutely love her to pieces. We had absolutely amazing callers that night. Now, not all of them were amazing, but one caller, you mentioned yourself, Matt, we had one caller who was just totally honest and said, actually, you know what, Magic Skeptic, you got me there. I don't have an answer for that. And so I'm really sorry. At which point Shannon interjected and I did as well. We're like, no, don't apologize for not knowing an answer. Saying you don't know is honorable. That's honesty. That's called intellectual integrity. The problem with theism, as far as I can tell, is that people aren't willing to admit that they don't know what they don't know and instead will assert things. And that's the problem. So admitting that you don't know is never a big problem. But yeah, I've seen lots of great callers, theists among them, to your show, Matt, and to others. So anyway, I know the question wasn't for me, but I thought it might be worth mentioning.
No, it's important. The next question is actually for you. And also, so there's a part of my brain where I'm a bit of a chameleon. And so when I was working for Dell and I would go over to the UK, specifically, I flew into Manchester and drove out to Stoke because Celestica had a motherboard manufacturing facility out there. And so I was out there to do the hardware testing on that. Anyway, the long story short is, after I'd been there about a day and a half, I already had a bit of an accent. And by the time I'd been there for a couple of weeks, it had come on stronger. So as it's not a mockery and it'll be bad, but I'm already slipping into it just a little bit, but there's a very good chance that reading this next super chat, I might sound a little more Irish or British or something at some point, but here we go. $20 from Eddie and Yunson. Great to see Matt do a show with Jack Skeptic, with the Jack Skeptic eye of atheism. Question for Dara. What's the status of the Catholic Church in Ireland? See? Ireland. Have you noticed
We're
any
brothers
decrease in
now.
affiliation or practice in your lifetime?
Certainly in my lifetime. Certainly in my lifetime. I mean, I'm 32 years of age at the time of recording, so I was raised in the 90s in Ireland, and so I've seen an enormous amount of change in my time. I mean, Ireland has become very anti-Catholic in some ways because of the priest scandal. I don't want to say the word because I don't want to get your video demonetized, but priests who are interested in people who they shouldn't be interested in because of they're too young, we'll put it that way. That has really changed a lot of minds in Ireland. And there are a number of referenda that I'll draw your attention to. So the gay marriage referendum passed with flying, shall we say, LGBTQ plus colours, which was great to see.
Right.
And like 60 to 70% of the public voted in favour of legalising gay marriage. Abortion was legalized again by a landslide victory, and we also abolished the crime of blasphemy from the Constitution, and that was also a landslide victory. So if you just look at the political overview, Ireland has changed and gone in what I would describe as a progressive and a good and a moral and ethical direction, in contrary to much to the chagrin, if you will, of those in holy orders who came out on force in each one of those referenda and resisted as strongly and as forcefully as they could. And I was so proud of my little country with each one of those decisive blows against those in holy orders. And if that's anything to go by, there's been an enormous amount of change. Unfortunately, I can't say much about the last 5 to 10 years because I've been living in the UK. I've been living in England. And so I don't have my finger on the pulse as I once did. And so, unfortunately, I might not be the best to ask about the most recent developments. But certainly since the 90s, Ireland has engaged in an enormous amount of change and gone in a more secular direction. And as I said, I'm very proud of my little country. I'm not a patriot. I see patriotism as something of a toxic force more than anything. But I'd be lying to you if I didn't admit to being proud of Ireland when those changes occurred. And so I hope that answers the question.
On a side note, without getting into all the politics, because we could get super chats to get to, there's so much going on in the world. There's wars in Gaza and Ukraine and everywhere else. I'm gonna look completely idiotic and ignorant right now. When you're talking about Ireland, you're talking about Ireland and not Northern Ireland.
Correct.
Is Northern Ireland making progress as well?
I would say yes. Now, granted, I'm not a historian of the subject, so take what I say here with a pinch of salt. But, I mean, in my lifetime, there's been an enormous amount of progress in terms of the peace that's been achieved in Northern Ireland. Every now and then, there seems to be a little bit of it that bubbles to the surface. Brexit played a huge role in causing those tensions to simmer because I don't know how familiar you are with Brexit, but basically the United Kingdom left the European Union. This is going to be very, very quick explanation. So if anybody wants to Google this, they can check it out. But basically, it turns out that for Ireland to have the rather tenuous peace that it has with the north of Ireland, and to keep things clear there, what's required is what's called regulatory alignment either side of the border. Because, of course, Northern Ireland, as it is known, is a statelet of the United Kingdom. It is part of the UK, whereas the Republic of Ireland is a republic. It's its own separate country, and there's a whole history attached to that if anybody's interested. But what Brexit did when it took the United Kingdom out of the European Union is it left the Republic of Ireland, because it's a separate country, in the European Union, whereas the north of Ireland was then going to be dragged out of the European Union, which then violates the Good Friday Agreement, because now there's no regulatory alignment either side of the border. This is getting very, very complicated, and I realize that, so I'll try and wrap this up quickly. Basically, what's had to happen in order to protect that regulatory alignment between the north and the south is that the British government has had to put an artificial border down the Irish Sea, which separates Northern Ireland politically or economically, you might say, from the rest of the UK. And the people in Northern Ireland who feel like they are British feel like this separates them from the UK. They're called unionists. They believe in the union, that the north of Ireland should be in the UK. But because of this border down the Irish Sea now, that's created huge tensions. And there was fire bombings in the last couple of years, buses on fire, and it's caused tensions to flare back up. So yeah, I think there's been great progress in terms of the peace process and so on. You know, the IRA aren't out executing people anymore, nor are the loyalist unionists out executing people anymore, to my knowledge. Violence is at an all-time low, but there are some really serious political tensions.
You asked how familiar I was with Brexit. I was actually on a plane when the final vote was passed. So when I landed in London, the first thing I did was I went up to one of the currency exchange things and said, okay, I just saw the news. What money do I need now? Do I need euros? Do I need pounds? Is there some new money I need? Because you guys changed everything while I was fucking flying over here.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
All right. You're up for this one from Naresh.
Yeah, sure. From, I don't know how to say that, N-E-R, are those threes E's? So Naresh, maybe?
I think so.
And I quote, "A wizard is never late to the hang-up, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to, and totally wasn't just distracted playing Minecraft."
That's fair. I totally wasn't playing Power World earlier. $20 from Erica America. Thank you so much, Erica. Greatly appreciate that. Oh, I just got a routing. So, Dade Murphy, get him, Matt. Thank you. I will try my best to get it. Well, not them so much, but it.
Shall I read this one?
Go for it.
$10 from Monkey at Typewriter. The anonymous twins were the most absurd thing I've seen on this channel in a while. But Dara describing fallacy stew, I gotta admit, it sounds tasty. Great show, guys. Glad the show worked today. So am I. I'm over the moon. Yep. This has been tremendously fun. And yeah, it really was a fallacy stew, wasn't it?
Yeah, you know that stew is both tasty and awful.
Yeah, true. Depending on who you ask.
$10 from the Raven 200. He, him. I feel you, Matt. I'd have to get up and take a break as well. I don't know how you do this, Matt. You're more patient than I. Your gay homie, Jimmy, go get stuck in a 24-hour call with Anonymous from North Carolina. Wow. That's a new finisher right there. Being stuck in a 24-hour call. There were things about Anonymous. Don't get me wrong. I think they're probably both wonderful, lovely people who, just like the rest of us, were massively confused. But there's a difference between somebody who's calling in to say, hey, I have these thoughts. What's wrong with them? And I have these thoughts and they're right. And when you're in a position, like, I can't prove there is no God, but I can demonstrate when you've committed a logical fallacy. I can't prove any number of different things, but I can make a demonstration of when someone's epistemological foundation is flawed. If your epistemology can lead you to multiple different mutually exclusive conclusions, your epistemology is broken. This is why we talk about, is faith a reliable path to truth? And the answer is absolutely not, because there's no position that you couldn't accept on faith. You could accept that white people are superior. You could accept that brown people are superior. You could accept that Democrats are superior, Republicans are superior, that Irish people are superior to Scottish people. You could, none of those. And they reverse for all of them. If your method, in this case, faith that I'm using as an example, can lead you to two different positions, which are mutually exclusive, then your method is shit. And there's no, if your method can lead you to two mutually exclusive conclusions, I'd seriously consider rethinking it, because your methodology seems to be unreliable and not a particularly useful. No, it's shit. We just need to start calling it what it is. It's like having a ruler that gives you different measurements every time. How long is a foot? I don't know. This thing's got foot markings in 4 different places. We're just going to go with which one I feel like today. You got to have a better method.
Yeah, I often use the analogy of a broken calculator. If you have a calculator where when you type in an equation, it gives you X as the answer, but then the next time you type in the exact same equation, it gives you Y. That's a calculator that you shouldn't be using. It's producing inconsistent results. And fallacious reasoning is a lot like that. It happens with the fallacy of composition. But yeah, anyway, that'll be a rabbit hole that we won't go down because we've got super chats. But yeah, yeah. So if it gives you mutually exclusive answers and they're both being produced by your epistemology, as Matt so eloquently put it, and I couldn't agree more, your epistemology is shit.
I should have said shite.
$10 from the Raven, 200. I can't help but feel like the Raven is a reference to your opening discussion about the Raven, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, the Raven 200, he, him. After that call with Anonymous, everyone be sure to take that like button out for a much needed drink. I received a telepathic message from the like button, and it definitely needs a beer after that call. Yeah, you and me
That's
both.
fair. Like,
and I don't even
like
drink.
Button, we are in favor of all of you abusing the like button, or you know what? Abuse the dislike button, because it all counts. Although they're not going to show you the number on the dislike. 999 from Secular Humanist. How do you control frustration when talking to family who seem to not understand your position? I heart you guys. Okay, this is great. I'm going to answer this quickly and then turn it over to Dara because we have slightly different, slightly different life, family issues on these. Generally speaking, I engage in these topics off the air with people who want to have those conversations. And without fail, they always go better in person. I don't recall the last time I got, well, I probably do. Probably the most heated discussion I've had on these issues was with my mom back in 2016, 2017. Because I actually haven't seen my mom since before COVID. I mean, we've talked and stuff, so it's not like we're estranged. It's just I haven't seen her because we don't live in the same area. But we had a long conversation, and it absolutely got heated. But it was heated in a potentially valuable way. Once upon a time, like if everybody was gathered for Christmas, I'd just sit in the corner and not say anything when the religious stuff came up. And they didn't even know I was an atheist for a while. Then when they figured out, A, I'm an atheist, B, I understand all of these subjects better than any of the rest of them do, and C, I'm not likely to stay quiet if you get over the top in your Jesus flaunting. All of a sudden, the conversation's changed. There isn't as much religious conversation in group family settings, despite the fact that the religiosity still exists at pretty much the same rate that it has for most of my life. It's people got to where they valued, hey, we don't need to get in an argument with Matt every year for Christmas. We can just enjoy Christmas together and laugh and play card games, do other stuff, and things are better. So I don't really get into it with family members that disagree anymore.
Yeah, for me, this is difficult. This is a really difficult question to answer, I have to say, because everybody's life is just so different from everybody else's, and everybody's family dynamics are going to be different from everybody else's. For me, all I can say is that for me, when it comes to my mother and I can discuss anything forever and never get heated or frustrated with one another. There's just, I don't know what it is, an equanimity, call it. We're just birds of a feather, and I'm, as I've said the last time I was on, I'm extraordinarily lucky to have her. We just, even when we disagree, our disagreements are always respectful. My mother leans in the direction of theism, although I think she might be better described as an atheist, which is a Dutch word meaning something. She's more of a person who believes that there's something there. Now, I can't falsify that, and she doesn't beat anybody over the head with it. She just has this religious instinct, you might say, which is arguably universal, although whether or not we should call it a religious instinct is up for debate. But yeah, we can just talk about that kind of stuff forever, and I'd never get frustrated, which is why I can't answer the question when it relates to my mother. My father, on the other hand, probably because we're more alike, is we get heated anytime we discuss anything we disagree on, whether it be politics. We don't disagree in religion. My dad is an atheist now, and he actually credits me for that deconversion, which is very humbling. He still believed in God when I detransitioned, or not detransitioned, forgive me, when I deconverted, I meant to say. Yeah, in terms of things that we disagree on, we do get heated. So a lot like you just said, Matt, my dad and I kind of don't discuss politics and social issues and that much anymore, because we've realized that it's not good for him, it's not good for me, and it's not good for the family who are around us. It can create heated moments. And by the way, I say all this with the utmost love, right? My dad is watching, and I'm not saying anything to disrespect his name or to badmouth him. I'm sure he would agree with everything I just said. We just don't, whatever that thing is that two hotheads need in order to be able to communicate, we just don't have that. And so we don't. We make the responsible decision now, and we generally avoid discussions where we know things are going to get heated. And so if I was to turn that into a piece of advice for this questioner, you don't have to have those conversations, I guess. I mean, some conversations are necessary, don't get me wrong. Sometimes something needs to be aired and you have to get through it, and it's going to be hard work, and there's just no way around it. But not everything has to be discussed. You don't have to discuss the politics or the religion of the day. You can just be in each other's company and talk about the weather.
None of my business, and definitely don't go into any specifics or anybody's position, but were you and your dad of slightly or vastly different positions on like Brexit or anything like that, on those big things, or are the differences more subtle?
Not on Brexit. He actually was very much on my side on that issue. I think we would be more in disagreement on social issues. So, I'll just give you an example. He would support death penalty, and I wouldn't. There's a case in point, right? So it's more on,
and I used to.
I guess that's not a social issue. It's more of a legal social stuff.
Yeah. I used to, even as an atheist, even for many of the first few years that I was hosting Atheist Experience, talking about it. In principle, I'm not opposed to the idea that someone could do a crime where the current state of affairs is such that the best course of action would be for them to not continue to live. However, our system is so currently broken that I wouldn't have confidence that we would ever have sufficient understanding of what that person has, whether or not they're guilty, and whether or not there's any hope for recidivism, or any fear of recidivism versus hope for change, to justify me being willing to kill him. I don't think we know enough to be willing to kill him, but so that's where I changed on that.
Yeah.
$10 from Storm Chaser Noah. Thanks for everything you folks do. Got any mints in your hand, Matt? I feel really bad, Noah, because I feel like I'm supposed to understand that. And maybe it's just because it's late and I'm tired, although it's only 10 minutes to 9 here. So if I start complaining about it being late and tired, Dara's going to look at me like I'm stupid. So
I
don't have any minutes in my hand.
I might be able to, I could be wrong here, but I seem to recall an episode, Matt, where you and it might have been Forrest Valkai were speaking to a person who said zero is a nonsensical concept, and Forrest said, how many penguins are there in my ears? And you said, how many mints are there in my hand? I think maybe that's maybe they're referencing that. I don't know. I could be misremembering that, but anyway.
No, it's that.
Because the answer, of course, is that I've got 0 mints in my hand, right? So 0 is an actual, it's a sensical concept that can manifest in some manner, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Because while I don't remember that, it's I mean, I'm glad that if anything I said was good enough for somebody to remember and reference. But right. this one's yours.
Cool. So $9.99 from Randy Baker. Question for both of you. What are some good books to read into atheism? I've been an atheist pretty much my whole life and currently reading Armin's book, TIABTW, #GFYJ.
So that is all.
I don't know what that is.
TIAB, that is TIAB, that is all. BTWs, by the way, and hashtag GFYJ is go fuck yourself, Jimmy. We use a lot of codes on the show.
Okay. Consider me initiated.
Yeah. You'll get your own codes here in a couple of shows.
I can't wait.
Randy, I have a video on my personal YouTube channel on the Atheist Debates Project where I go through book recommendations. So I'll just direct you over there because that'll promote traffic there, and I won't have to repeat myself. And then Dara can give whatever book recommendations he likes.
This is gonna be tricky because you gave me a compliment a moment ago for remembering things, but I don't think my memory is actually that good. I think any good fundamental book about logic and fallacies is incredibly useful. While not technically about atheism, I think it's astonishingly valuable. Yes, yeah, that's great. I can't remember. My logic book is downstairs. I got a great book on logic. There you go. See, Matt's done his homework. Any good book, and there's many of them. My one was just called An Introduction to Logic, but I'm ashamed to say I forgot the author's name. And I found that to be astonishingly useful. And so that would be a great place to start. I also, a book that Matt often recommends that I read because Matt recommended it was, Matt, you might be able to recall the title. It's by John Allen Paulus.
Innumeracy.
Innumeracy, thank you. Yeah, that's a really, really great book, which just gives you a window into the mindset, or a window into human beings and our innumeracy, our proclivity to think very poorly when it comes to logic and mathematical reasoning and so on. I think these kinds of books are wonderful insights and are, I would say, not necessarily supportive of atheism, but as Matt often points out, I'm a skeptic first and an atheist second. And so I think these books would help you in your skepticism more so than helping you in your atheism, you know. So those would be some recommendations from me.
I'm not just happen to grab the ones that are close. These are close here because these are the ones I recommend quite frequently. Lost Christianities is my favorite of all of Bart Ehrman's books. It was the most eye-opening for me. So thank you, Randy. Hopefully that helped. $20 from Godfrey and Good. Aloha, great show. Currently, could a logical argument be made? Yes, a logical argument can be made for anything. Curry's paradox, but I'll skip that. For the non-existence of a God, yes. If not, is the burden of proof of the claim no gods exist still a reasonable expectation? Okay. Any claim, whether it's God exists, no God exists, carries with it a burden of proof, period.
Yes.
Irrespective of what the argument is or whether or not a reasonable argument can be made. I think the best argument for the non-existence of specific gods is the argument from divine hiddenness, the argument from inconsistent revelation, and all of those that fall into that same category of the world does not appear to be consistent with the properties of the God that people are proposing. Yeah, so I think there can be a case made for the non-existence of specific gods, but God as a general category, I don't think is defined well enough for there to be a logical argument that is both valid and sound against a broad category of God.
Yeah, it just seems to me that it's unfalsifiable for the most part. As soon as you start getting into really amorphous definitions of God, or whether it even constitutes a definition might actually be a discussion worth having. But, you know, as soon as you start getting into God is just an entity that exists outside of space and time, intangible, immaterial, silent, orderless, etc., it's not clear to me that that can be falsified. And if something can't be falsified, that's not evidence in favor of it. I've had conversations with theists where they said, yeah, but you can't disprove my God. So there, as though that was a gotcha. But the fact that I can't disprove it is actually evidence of the unfalsifiability of your belief, which means you don't have epistemic warrant to believe it. You also can't disprove the existence of the invisible, pink, intangible elephant in the corner of my fucking room. And yet that doesn't serve as evidence in favor of the existence of that invisible, pink, intangible elephant. Right? So if something is unfalsifiable, I would argue that you have no good reason to accept it. You have got no good reason. You do not have, definitionally, you don't have epistemic warrant to accept it. And so unfalsifiability is not a strength of your view. It's in fact the admission that your belief in that very thing is fundamentally irrational. And so, yeah, for me, it just all seems like a big bag of unfalsifiability. As Matt pointed out, with some more specific conceptions of God, there might be grounds to falsify it because it might have some feature that's incompatible with the reality we see in front of us. I'm open to that, but as we were discussing, as soon as you get into the more abstract ideas, then it becomes, all bets are off. It becomes unfalsifiable, and there's nowhere to go from there.
That it's too late for me to do this right now. But getting back to the Raven paradox, I wonder if there's a way to respin that with regard to falsifiability, such that someone's inability to falsify the unicorn in the corner of your room is also evidence that gods are all fictional. I'd have to work. I mean, and it's not going to be convincing, just like Curry's paradox, which we already talked about when I had Kane on, and a little bit in a video I did. Essentially, you can prove anything you want using Curry's paradox. So there are limitations to logic that you have to be aware of. $10 from the Raven 200. Dara, actually, Raven is my actual first name. I'm Nez Perce, Native American on my dad's side. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Wasn't a reference today.
Was that a coincidence? Or is there some kind of divine intervention going on here, huh?
How do you tell the difference?
How do you tell the difference, huh?
There we go.
Somebody should ask that caller. Fucking hell. All right. NOK, NOK is the currency, isn't it? 100. What's NOK? Can I just ask what currency is that? Am I an idiot?
I think is it Swedish krona?
Let's go with that.
Yeah, or Norwegian, I think.
Or Norwegian.
Okay, so 100.
You're a guy from Europe. You're over there in the UK. You're way closer to this currency than me. How the fuck do you not know? Is this a Brexit thing where you forgot everything about Europe after you pulled out?
I don't know, Matt. I don't know. I can't answer that. I'm living under a rock, perhaps. I don't know. Anyway, Arsenic, 1987. Love seeing you on, Dara. Thank you very much. Thanks for the show. Now I wish to wash my Irish wristwatch. Have a good one. Thank you very much.
You have an Irish wristwatch and you need to wash it?
So I just read it and I didn't think about it. So now I wish to wash my Irish wristwatch. Have a good one. I don't know what they're talking about.
I wonder if that's like a tongue twister of some sort. You know, now I wish to wash my Irish wristwatch. You know, where or if you say it in a certain accent, it's just hard.
Or maybe it's just another one of those things that I don't know, like not knowing the currency of Norway.
That's fair. That could be completely fair. $10 from Dante Verona. Hey man, how you doing? Matt, at some point, I'm curious to hear your commentary on the Republican candidate for governor of North Carolina, Mark Robertson. Just vile every step of the way. You've got tons of criticism to point out. Yeah, I saw the first video from this guy because I'm not in North Carolina. I saw it today, where he's standing up in a church, basically decrying that there are only two genders, and that's just the way it is. This is a guy who's, I think he's the Republican frontrunner for governor right now. Maybe the only candidate. I haven't followed the North Carolina. I literally saw it today. And I suspect we'll talk more about it in a future Wednesday as we dig into more politics stuff. But I'm not up to speed. But thanks, Dante. I will definitely get more up to speed on that one.
1999 from Melody Kate. More Dara and Matt. Oh, well, thank you very much, Melody. That means a lot. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, it's good stuff. By the way, you can check out Dara at youtube.com/TheMagicSkeptic. And also you can go to linemerch.com to get your own merchandise here. And in addition to the line merch that we normally have a splash screen info about, if you go to linemerch.com right now, you will see this awesome design of a red-faced, bedeviled, horned, bearded version of me that is my birthday merch, because my birthday is this month. Jimmy's birthday was yesterday, right?
Yes, yesterday.
Yeah. Jimmy's birthday was yesterday. He's got a design up there as well, but we're kind of in competition here. I think his design is really good. It's unafraid to disappoint daddy, magical or otherwise, and shows like two different faces merged there. I think it's outstanding, but I really like my my devil face, even though it's like almost the older version of the beard, so it's not quite as full. But yes, you can go over the line and you can get In Boss of Atheism unisex tees, stickers, women's fit shirts, hoodies, coffee cups. You can put anything you want in that coffee cup. You can put coffee in it. You can put Irish coffee in it. You can put tequila in it. You can put your pins in it and set it on the corner of the desk. You can
put everything and nothing.
Yes. Everything and nothing that will fit in there. Things that won't fit, though, clearly you won't be able to put those in there. I just want to make sure we got those things in. We have 2 more super chats that have come in just while I was rambling on about that stuff. $10 from the Raven, butts and boobs for Jimmy. Mostly butts, however. That's fair. And Dara, if you'll read what I suspect will be the final super chat from this evening.
$10 from Adam. Thank you for the entertainment and rational thoughts. It was my pleasure, Adam.
Well, this was just 2 bucket loads of fun. And I look forward to getting you back. I'm really thrilled that we got to do this. Thank you for your patience in coming back on despite the technical glitch the last time. Hello to your folks who I hope have gone to bed. They're not as night owl as you are, right? They've given up on the show by now, right?
I suspect they might still be up.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they weren't going to miss this. That's for sure.
Now you're over in England or Wales, right?
England. Yep.
Okay. Are your folks in England or are your folks still in Ireland?
No, they're still in Ireland.
Oh, all right. Well, I've been to England several times, so I'm just going to put in a bid right now. The next time I come over, I just want to make sure I stop in Ireland. So, Mom, Dad, I look forward to stopping by for a visit. In the meantime, let me wrap some stuff up. We've had a blast tonight and some really, really interesting theist callers, including some that I find mind-numbingly annoying. This notion that God is nothing and everything and something and whatever, and I don't know. And look, I enjoy a bong rip every now and then as well, but there's a difference between saying, I have good reason to believe that a God actually exists, and dude, what if there's a God who's just consciousness, but also maybe logic and logical consciousness? And it's cool, man. But we don't need that. We don't need that call. It doesn't get us any closer, especially if you have such an esoteric view of God. Esoteric meaning that it applies, to you almost alone or specifically. I'm interested in defenses of the gods that make up the billions of Christians and Muslims and other God believers that have doctrine that they believe, that guides their everyday life decisions, that determines how they're going to vote, who they're going to respect, whose rights they're going to respect, how they're going to treat other people. Some abstract God that may or may not be out there, or, it's a first cause, blah, blah, blah. I don't see how you're going to actually demonstrate it, but until you do, I give less than 0 fucks about it. What I do give many, many fucks about are how we're going to live and get along. Somebody came into my Twitch stream yesterday or the day before. I stream games on Twitch I have for years. They asked me what I thought was going to happen in this upcoming election. And without missing a beat, I said, right now I'm convinced that Donald Trump is going to win. And I didn't even realize until I said it that that was actually what my opinion was. Up until that moment, I'd been going, I hope it's not going to be that way. I'm trying to remain optimistic. And in my head, I went back to the 2016 election. And in October, 1 month before the election took place, Dawkins and I were in Vancouver, and I was asked whether or not Donald Trump would win. And I laughed and mocked the idea. It's patently absurd. There's absolutely no, let me tell you, because you guys are Canadian, and I know you don't get the best news up here, but let me tell you, as the resident American here, there's no fucking way that's going to happen. And boy, was I wrong. And while I generally would like to have confidence in who we are as a nation and whether or not we can be reasonable, what I've seen since 2016, despite the 2020 election, is less consideration of science, less consideration of facts, fewer reasonable arguments, more conspiracy thinking, more absurd positions, more people outright advocating for immorality. I saw a great meme today that it's a strange world to be living in, where the guy who likes ice cream and bumbles around as kind of the average Joe is not the guy that appeals to the everyman in the way that a rapist, felon, well, not felon, rapist, multiple indictee who inspired an insurrection, who stood up and said he could shoot someone and get away with it. And he was probably right. The fact that that guy is more appealing than somebody who's a little bumbling with a stutter and likes ice cream, your grandpa, is bizarre. And so when they asked me, what do I think is going to happen? I don't think I missed a beat. I think you can go back and watch the VOD. And I immediately said, right now, I think Trump's going to win. And I have no idea what the world's going to look like after that. I don't think you can possibly make too big of a deal about this. I'm not going to derail everything because I'm putting a bow on tonight, but maybe we'll get Dara back another time to get views on how the UK perceives what's going on here in the United States while they are dealing with their own problems as well. The backlash of ultra-conservative, anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ. Oh my God, the transes are the biggest issue in the world. It's happening everywhere. I spent most of this morning arguing with a woman in London who likes to brag about how she won a debate. And I was like, come at me. Let's debate, you transphobe. But we have climate change issues. We have war issues. We have constitutional crises brewing in the United States with a Supreme Court that is stacked to be a
because of Trump,
of the right wing, because of Trump.
Yeah.
If I'm right,
Matt,
and he wins, I don't know where we're going to be. I don't know how it's going to go. I hope
one
that
thing
I'm wrong.
One thing I'll say on the Trump thing from the outside looking in, and it frustrates me completely, is that when you say what you just said, there will be people who will watch this video and they'll jump into the comment section and they'll say, oh, Matt is suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. This is the label that they roll with when anybody raises a criticism of Trump. I was thinking about this the other day. What that is gaslighting. What they're doing is shutting down any intellectual conversation. They're shutting down any skeptical inquiry or critique by just walling you off as somebody who's deranged, Trump derangement syndrome. At the end of the day, we don't debate people who are deranged. If somebody is deranged, they are by definition incapable of reasonable conversation. And so what I see happening in America is that good, decent, honest, and moral people like you are raising their concerns about Donald Trump. And these aren't nuanced concerns, right?
Yeah.
Some of the things that this guy gets up to are like, it's not even up for debate in terms of, oh, is it moral? Is it immoral? It's not like there's nuance to the conversation. The things that he said about women, grabbing them by the you-know-what, the stacking of the Supreme Court, which undoubtedly is part of the reason that Roe v. Wade was reversed, and so forth. And those are just, two examples that come to mind. You raise these concerns and you worry about the future if and when Donald Trump wins, and I share your concern about him winning, by the way. And then all that the right appears to have is to respond to you and say, oh, you're just suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. It reminds me of theists who, rather than debate with atheists like you and I, they just say, we're evil. Right? Now they don't have to deal with this, because if they're evil, then clearly their ideas don't matter, because we don't want to listen to evil people. Who wants a lecture from Adolf Hitler, right? Yeah. It's a gaslighting tactic. It's a way of shutting down conversation. It's a way of preventing critique and conversation. It is the opposite of skepticism and what it means to be a rational, intellectual human being. And from the outside looking in, Matt, it makes me very, very sad. And I hope you're wrong for what it's worth. I hope you're wrong, and I hope Trump loses. But I really do fear that you're correct, because one thing I can say, you asked about the UK, one thing I can say for absolute certain is that whoever becomes the president of the United fucking States of America has an impact on everyone around the world, not just people who live in the USA. So we watch with great interest over here in the UK, and I hope, at least, I can't speak for everybody, not like a previous caller did tonight. I'm not going to be arrogant and speak for everyone. What I will say is that, again, I hope you're wrong, Matt. And I hope these people who do see themselves as supporters of Trump would stop shutting down conversation by just walling it off and saying that Matt and I and everybody else is suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Why don't you actually have the conversation, and we'll see what idea wins out in the end. And you might realize that you're supporting a monster. But anyway.
Yeah. No, if it turns out that I'm wrong, I will have one. If it turns out that I'm wrong, I will have one hell of a party. In the meantime,
I'm gonna bump it.
In the meantime, I'm gonna give the final word to the producer, like I told her I would announce it.
Okay, well, I don't know why you gotta interrupt me to pass me the fucking mic when I'm interrupting you to take the fucking mic, but Jesus Christ.
Take it. Take it away from me.
Because some little shit stain in chat told me I was a lousy producer because I missed a super chat for Shannon. That's because Matt asked me about 10 minutes ago if I had an ad for the merch. And in that 10 minutes, I managed to Photoshop together 4 pieces of merch and make an input on vMix, but I missed it by like 2 fucking seconds. So, first of all, I have to show you guys the merch that you can get. Go get your merch at limemerch.com for the birthday brawl. If you're a patron, you get a discount code for this amazing birthday merch for Matt and Jimmy. Go get yours. It's super fucking cool. And also, we missed 2 super chats because
I got them.
While I was trying to make that happen, they slipped through. So
I got them. Cody Cooper says, how is it that so many people still believe in this religion BS? Do they not go to school and get taught real science? There's a lot of dubiousness and misrepresentation of science. And so by what happens a lot of times is that people, while they will learn science in schools, the religion education is providing counter education to those points as well, and inserting doubt. And one of the most common aspects of doubt that they insert, which is so easy to debunk, everybody needs to know this right off the bat. Well, science keeps changing what it says about reality. Yes. That's because we keep increasing our understanding and correcting our errors. Only religion doesn't change what the text says. But you know what? Christianity today is way different from what was 200, 300, 400 years ago. But why? Not because they discovered anything new, not because there's any new testament, not because there's any new evidence or fact, but because people are growing and realizing the antiquated religious ideas just aren't as appealing. They're just not as appealing. They're more appealing to some people. Some people are trying to move back to traditional values, but at no point has anybody made a presentation saying, Here's the evidence about who God is and what God wants. We now have a better understanding. Religion doesn't operate the way science does. It is a credit to the scientific process that it constantly presents tentative positions that are subject to revision upon additional examination and new evidence. That is the strength of science and a weakness of religion. And you can read the final super chat because it came in from Shannon Q.
$10 from Shannon Q. Team Dara for life. Also a high mat or whatever.
Or whatever.
I love
fair.
you, Shannon.
That's I love Shannon too, but you know, if she's just going to be mean to me on my own show, I'm going to go cry. Nope, that's it. Thank you, everybody. Huge thank you to Arden for making up the graphic that we didn't have for the birthday stuff. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. Get out and vote. Prepare for more political stuff because there's an election this year, and I'm going to be siding with Taylor Swift to remind people to do your due diligence. Investigate your options and vote. Unless you're going to vote Republican, then stay home. It's all conspiracy. Your vote won't count anyway. I know, right? Look at all those patron producers. Hey, there's Steve and Paul. Oh, Kathleen Moncrief, who I didn't see tonight, but we still love you, Kathleen. Hope you're doing well. Hey, look, there's a Morgan who's also a producer. You should just change his name from a Morgan to a producer.